Call to order. Welcome to the Laramie City Council work session for Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. To begin with, I'd ask, are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none, then we will go on to our first work session, which is an update on EMS service delivery transition, and I'll turn this over to the city manager.
Mayor, thank you. I'll be happy to introduce this while the fire chief approaches to start the presentation. As council will recall, we have been working with Ivinson Memorial Hospital to transition patient transfer services to the hospital and out of Laramie Fire. Chief Johnson will provide you an update on the progress we've been making. I believe our consultant, Fitch & Associates, that we have contracted with to help effect this transition on the city's side, they will also have some detail to share with you after Chief Johnson is finished.
Thank you. Okay, welcome, Chief Johnson.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, thanks for your time tonight on this. I'll roll through it. As Janine said, she asked me to do a brief you on the transition, but she also asked me to go over kind of the history of the EMS in Laramie and for counselors that are new. And so we'll go through that pretty quick. And then we have one of our consultants will be updating you on the transition. So in 1979, we began running the ambulance service, so we've been in this business for 46 years. We did all emergency response and interfacility transfers. Interfacility transfers are all transfers that go out of town, plus all we consider any helipad transfers, any fixed wing transfers, any transfers out of the hospital into town, back to the nursing home or things like that. So those are all the IFTs. The ones that really impact our service are the ones that go out of town. We'll talk about them more in more detail. Fast forward from 79 to 2011 to 2013, we were evaluating the EMS service back then about how we were providing it and how the billing was running and how we were being reimbursed. We hired a consultant. We went on an RFP, hired a consultant to analyze our system, and they focused on three areas. First was our organizational overview, our partnership with IMH. Then they looked at our service delivery and performance, and basically we used to run what we call a duty MS, just run everything out of Station 1. Second line came out of Station 1. Now we're districted between the three stations. And then the last thing, the last one was they looked at our finances, looked at what the city was providing in finance, and they looked at what IMH was providing. We developed a profit loss pro forma, and we established our annual reconciliation process at that time. 2017, we entered into a 5-year, what we call lease agreement. Things had been working pretty good under our former agreement. We entered into this agreement. The call loads were pretty steady. So when we entered this 5-year lease agreement, things were looking pretty good. The Albany County Board of Commissioners also at that time acknowledged that we were going out into the county on a lot of calls. 21% of our emergency calls go out into county, and they passed a resolution recognizing that in 2017, early. In October of 2018, our out-of-town IFTs, I split out our IFTs into the out-of-town ones because they're the ones that really impact us. We were exceeding 350 in 2018. So we launched, we needed to get some help on those. We launched what we call the Civilian Provisional Driver Program, assisting us with the increased transfer workload. I believe we launched that with a $50,000 budget, and we trained people. They would come in, they were part-time, non-benefited, they would be paid for the hours. 2019, under the recommendation of the Fitch analysis, we passed the municipal code, Chapter 8.7, that establishes the City of Laramie exclusive providing ambulance service in the city. 2020, this is a big commitment. We, due to the call loads, we established our minimum staffing level went up from 10 to 11 on shift. We have 14 FTEs assigned to each shift, and we operate the start of each day. We started 11 firefighters. And the reason we did that, we were trying to do all we can to get more firefighters on structure fires to have available on the fire ground. 2021 to 2022, we're coming to the end of our 5-year lease agreement. It hasn't been working out too good toward the end of the agreement. We started talking with the hospital in late 2021. We felt at that time we really need to split out the whole IFT business and run it as its own entity. It has grown so much. My next slide will show how much that grew. So we proposed the IFTs be split out. We presented our data and our funding proposals, and they were not accepted. So we both jointly agreed to keep doing what we were doing and enter into another analysis and look at recommendations performed by Fitch and Associates. January of 2022, we entered into a formal agreement with the Board of Commissioners of Albany County, establishing ourselves doing EMS service throughout the county, and they started fiscally participating in funding also at that time. We've been in that agreement now 3.5 years. September of 2022, so by 2020, our IFT out-of-town workload was 429. In 2021, we logged 518 transfers out of town. In 2022, we had 530. You can see we're kind of getting buried by the IFTs, so we launched a pilot program of a civilian paramedic program. We brought them on board in September of 2022, launched it with, I believe the budget was $200,000 when we started it, but it's grown to 5 full-time paramedics as we currently sit. In April of 2023, we added an additional ambulance to our fleet. We just didn't, we replaced, instead of getting rid of it, we kept it because we really needed that number of calls. We needed another ambulance. So we have 6 now that we're maintaining and running. 2023, Fitch and Associates is doing its analysis that year. We're providing them data, both IMH, City of Laramie, providing data. We both funded the project. In 2024, is that 2024? In 2024, in June, the council received its work session with the Fitch analysis with its recommendation. In summary, the recommendation was that the department really needed to have 2 ambulances staffed full-time and ready to go for transfers to handle the transfer load that has been increasing. We also did studies on what we call 1.5 units, would be 2 units during the day and drop it down to 1 unit staffed at night just for transfers. We put that data together, monetized that, and the hospital and city did not come to terms on the agreement. So we went back to the negotiating table, and then by November of last year, it was decided to separate ways. And the City of Laramie will prepare to operate it as its own entity. We will do emergency response calls in the City of Laramie and Albany County, and the hospital would take care of their inter-facility transfer business. And I've got all kinds of data and stuff. I didn't throw that on the slides. I'd like to go into the transition update now and have Chad Primo from Fitch and Associates. He's a senior associate team member. He's assigned to this project, and he's been our main contact. And I don't know if I'll turn it over to him. think you can load up his slides.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to update you all on where we're at. I did provide a few slides, so I'm not sure if you'll all control the slide deck or if I will, but we'll figure it out, I guess. So, let me see. Okay. All right. Should I just tell you when I want the next slide? Is that best way to do it? Okay. So quick introduction. Just so to level set a little bit. So who is Fitch & Associates? We're a national EMS public safety and healthcare consulting firm. We've been in business now for 41 years. We've worked with the city of Laramie over the past, I believe, 20-some years, according to the chief. So we've done a few studies for you and helped out along the way. So who are the teammates on the project from Fitch? I'm the primary contact, like the chief said. I'm based in Toledo, Ohio, well, just outside of Toledo, Ohio. I've been with Fitch & Associates now full-time for 3 years. Before that, I was in EMS for 30-plus years, and I managed some pretty large EMS systems in both the hospital and 911 areas. So I'm the primary contact. We also have Chief Mike Mondor. He works part-time for us. He's a fire chief in Minnesota, and he brings a lot of experience with him on the fire department side and also on the EMS side, running a similar service of similar size of what you all are doing. So that's our experience. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a little update on our project dashboard. So we use a project management program called Asana, and many of you may be familiar with it. It's a nice software package to help map and track progress of the transition project. It allows for a methodical approach and also for accountability. So we have a total of 56 tasks and milestones that we've identified for the transition. 19 of those tasks we've already completed, so we're doing really well. We haven't hit any significant delays or hurdles, and I believe we're on track, if not ahead of schedule, to meet the September 1st deadline. So that's the good news. The other good piece of news is there's really no danger of service interruption. I mean, you're all providing the E911 service now, and that's not going to change. So all of this is behind the scenes, and really the public and the patients won't really see much of anything. So next slide, please. So some of the key milestones we've already met. We released a billing vendor RFQ, so a request for a quote. We developed and released that. 3 vendors submitted quotes, and we interviewed all 3. And they're very reputable companies that provide services across the country. We've personally, as a firm, dealt with all 3. We feel very confident in all of them. We've selected one vendor based upon the team's feedback from the interviews and the presentations. And so right now we're reviewing the contracts they sent over, and our firm has went through and made some suggestions on the contract language, and I believe the chief has submitted that up to the city legal department for review too. So once we get those back, we'll send those back to the vendor, and hopefully they'll accept any of the changes and we can proceed. Next slide. Some of the other milestones we've met, we've verified that all the necessary licenses and certifications are present, they're verified, and we've had to renew a few. The CLIA certificate, which is the laboratory certificate that allows the paramedics to do like blood sugar testing and things like that, we've updated that. Chase applied and obtained the MPI number So that's a number that's very important in order to get your Medicare and Medicaid validations. So that's done. The drug licenses, the state and the DEA license have been verified and renewed, and the ambulance license was verified. So you need all those documents and certifications in place so you can do compliant billing. So next slide, please. So what's going on now? So when I give updates on these projects, things are so fluid. I like to talk about the now, near, and the far. So what's going on now? So we have the billing vendor and the collection contract being reviewed, like I said. We also have the medical director contract being reviewed. Since the separation, we'll need a contract specifically with the medical director that's not through the hospital. And we've reviewed those, and I believe the chief was sending that over to the legal department too. We're also looking at the supply and pharmaceutical vendors and the processes involved there, and we're reviewing those. Chief Mondor has a really good handle on these things, and so he's leading up that with Chase. And because we'll need to, historically, a lot of the pharmaceuticals were obtained through the hospital, so we'll have to set up some processes so the city can get those directly. We've also looked at some alternative destination and mutual aid policies, just to make sure that those are on the books if they're needed, and so those are being finalized. So next slide, please. In the near future, we'll be onboarding with the billing vendor. So once we get the contracts back, and the chief will bring them all for approval. Once they're approved and signed, we'll start our onboarding process with the billing vendor. Normally that can take 60 to 90 days. That's the normal process. We're already doing things ahead of time to help speed up that process. So hopefully it will be more on the 60-day side. Some things that can go slowly include the Medicaid validation process, because normally you have to get your Medicare number first, and sometimes state Medicaid offices just aren't that fast. The good news, though, is you have a year to submit billing, so even if it's a little delayed, it would just be delayed billing. It wouldn't be lost billing, which is important. And we'll also start to onboard with commercial payer providers, and they're all a little different, but the billing companies have a lot of experience with that, and they help walk us through that process. So, and then we'll also have to set up a lockbox at a bank to receive payments and revenues. So, next slide, please. A little farther out, some of the processes we'll start working on are the collections policies. So a lot of that will be driven by you all and how you want to pursue some of those policies. Obviously, we'll make recommendations for you. We'll also have to optimize the revenue cycle management processes. So we've already started talking with the chief and Angie about some of those items and setting up the systems. So we'll be proactive on the front end, so there won't be a lot of optimization work that will need to be done. But once you start to receive funds and collections, then sometimes it's good to do some tweaking on how those processes go. We'll develop some metrics and dashboards for routine performance monitoring and reporting. That way, you all as a governing body can stay looped into what's going on and keep an eye on things. We'll finalize the supply and pharmaceutical vendor agreements and processes so those things run smoothly. And then ultimately, we'll help put together some public education and communication planning so nobody feels surprised or shocked on what's going on. So next slide, please. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. I'm always happy to talk to anybody on the council and take them through our project management software tool. I'm very accessible. The chief has all my contact information. Are there any questions for me?
Councilors, any questions? Vice Mayor Richardson?
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation, Chad. And just a couple of small details that I don't understand, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
You had talked about the medical director needing a new contract. So is the medical director a new director that we would make a contract with, or is this the medical director at the hospital that would be a separate contract than what we've done before?
No, it's the same medical director. It's just because of the entity changes, we'll need to have a new contract with them. Plus, there's some other items that the department needs, and we'd like to spell that out in the contract.
Perfect. And then the second question, I think, is kind of along those same lines, and that's the alternative destination piece. So is that new contracts that we would need to set up if we were not delivering to IMH, or what? Can you explain that just a little bit? I didn't understand that either, exactly what that is about.
Sure. So the chief talked about how at times they were having to do calls outside of the city into the county to help support the county on the 911 side. So at times, some of those transports would go to other hospitals. So we're just verifying that we have the right policies in place to cover the department for when that happens, because sometimes the transport hospitals that are closer are not IMH, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councilors? Any questions for the chief?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Chief Johnson. And thank you, Chad. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Have a good night.
City Manager, is there anything further with this presentation?
No, that concludes staff's presentation for this work session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that completed, I'd like to ask if there's any public comment on this agenda item, and I believe I do have 3 people signed up, so what I'll do first is call the individuals in the order that I have them signed up. First, Jordan Hayes. Thank you, Jordan. Welcome. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
This letter was written by my husband. This letter was written by my husband. To my fellow citizens of Laramie, for many years, Laramie has been served by one of the most progressive and high-performing EMS systems in the region. Our reputation and capabilities are the envy of many. That era is, I fear, coming to an end. Late last year, Ivinson Memorial Hospital, IMH, and the Laramie Fire Department, LFD, were unable to agree on terms for LFD to continue providing IMH with inter-facility medical transports, taking IMH patients down to Fort Collins or Denver, etc. This has thrown the financial outlook of LFD into some degree of chaos, resulting in the impending layoffs of all 5 of LFD's non-fire paramedics. To understand how tragic this is, a few blunt facts need disclosed. LFD runs around 5,000 calls per year. 9 out of 10 are medical. That's 90%. For the last 3 years, 5 non-fire paramedics have run, on a conservative estimate, 50% of all call volume. These 5 paramedics, who have between them 80 years of experience, save many lives every year performing interventions only a paramedic, and in some cases only a critical care paramedic, can provide. Staffing requirements at LFD mean that unless one of the 5 non-fire paramedics are on duty, the ambulances are staffed with the least experienced EMTs. Our community is blessed to have excellent firefighter EMTs. Nonetheless, there is an unappreciated large difference in training and capabilities between an EMT, even an EMT intermediate, and a paramedic or critical care paramedic. These terms are not interchangeable, and neither are the skills and training. It is true that for most patients the differences will be small, but for some, in particular children, those with complex medical issues like cardiac, respiratory, or seizure issues, and victims of massive trauma, it can be the difference between living and dying.
Thank you, Jordan. Next, Jason Peterson. Is there, oh. That's okay, take your time, don't run.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome, Jason.
I'm B.
Oh, and you are?
I'm B.
Oh, you're B. Mock.
Yeah, sorry
Okay,
about that.
thank you, B.
Yeah. Two people in particular, Chief Johnson and former EMS Division Chief Mike Hotchkiss, worked together on the groundbreaking non-fire paramedic program. They devised a cutting-edge way to bring paramedic level care to as many patients as possible, as efficiently as possible. This combined fire EMS model is being adopted now in more and more places. This combined fire EMS model, it makes a lot of sense. Even though these paramedics have substantially more training, they remain more cost-effective to employ than firefighters. So taxpayer money goes further. It's exceedingly expensive, way more expensive than the paramedic program, both in cost and time for a fire department to send its firefighters to paramedic school. The EMT intermediate level that all LFD firefighters must attain is relatively rare national. That's because the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians, the agency that oversees the EMS nationally, sunsetted the EMT intermediate level in 2013. The curriculum is no longer being developed. The books are falling apart. There will come a day in not too distant future when the certification will have to be abandoned. On that day, citizens of Laramie will lose the following capabilities in pre-hospital medical care entirely: pain control, basic seizure treatment, advanced cardiac life support, pediatric life support, intubation for unstable airways, and much more. And then the true bill will come due. The cost of getting enough firefighters to paramedic level will be absurdly expensive, and once they obtain the paramedic certification, expect many of them to leave. Firefighter paramedics make more money than anyone else in EMS, except in Laramie. Thank you.
Thank you, B. And do we have Jason Peterson? Or is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes, please come up and state your name for the record. Thank you.
My name is Jordan Hayes, one of the 5 paramedics that's getting laid off. The 5 of us save many lives every year performing interventions only we can perform. But to make the tragedy of what is happening eminently clear, let me tell you just one life that was saved this year. Laramie is no stranger to bad weather. Life flight crews are frequently unable to get here. This year we had a baby who took a very bad turn overnight. IMH was doing good work, but this baby needed to get to Denver Children's as quickly as possible. Flights were unable to get here. The ground team from Children's was in New Mexico. The roads were ice. We had only one option. We had to risk the weather and get the baby there ourselves. One of the critical care non-fire paramedics from LFD and a former pediatric flight nurse from IMH with an LFD firefighter driving took the baby down to Denver with lights and sirens nearly the whole way. One of the baby's lungs went offline at the Lincoln Summit. The rest of the drive was a pitched battle, with the non-fire paramedic and the nurse performing interventions few are trained for. The ambulance pulled up to Children's with almost no time to spare. Things were so urgent, the pediatric intensivist, pacing up and down the sidewalk, met the ambulance outside the emergency department doors. I shudder to fathom the potential outcome had we not had these resources in town. And it is these very resources, these very people, the only people capable of performing that level of service to the community, that are losing their jobs. Keep in mind, 90% is EMS. Laying off people who have dedicated their lives to advanced medical care in the current context makes no sense. Somewhere in city management is an unawareness or an unwillingness to properly value the capabilities of a paramedic. All 5 of us have begun moving on. Even if the tune changed tomorrow, I doubt we could stop this bleeding. This is not a last-ditch attempt to save my job. This is a warning. There is a nationwide shortage of paramedics. Having 5 with 80 years of collective experience, with advanced critical care training common only on flight crews, managing to run 50% of all call volume, teamed up with excellent firefighters, is, I dare say, unheard of. And so unfortunately, I leave you with one final grim fact. In the next few months, the level of care LFD is able to provide will decline, such that more of the citizens of Laramie and Albany County, or those passing through, will die. They need not have.
Thank you, Jordan. Are there any other public comments on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for coming and providing your comments to council. We will move on now to our next work item, and that is the recommended supplemental budget. And City Manager, I'll turn that over to you, please.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. So we are happy to be here for the second in your series of work sessions on the supplemental budget for year 2 of the fiscal biennium. And of course, the start date of year 2 is July 1st of this year, and the second, and the ending of that second fiscal year will be June 30th of 2026. Council, we thought we would start off tonight with the general fund. We will focus first on Director Wade providing an overview of financial position and revenues. Then I will give you an overview of the supplemental recommendations within the general fund. With Chief Johnson here with us this evening, we will then move to the fire department and let him talk specifically about his department. And we will conclude with a few other departments presenting their budget. As you know, the general fund is substantially large, and we will not cover all of it this evening, but we will cover all of it in the subsequent meeting next Tuesday, excuse me. And then beginning next Wednesday, we will work on looking at our enterprise business activity funds and covering those with you. With that, I'm going to introduce Administrative Services Director Jennifer Wade, and she is going to start off with maybe seeking some input from you with Owen Schultz.
So we have a bit of fun for you this evening to start the budget work session. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Owen Schultz. He is a management analyst with the city. I think you may have met him before. And Owen actually heard some of your comments at a work session not too long ago about really trying to have some fun with getting the word out. And so we're going to try this with budget. And Owen has some concepts to run by you this evening. So.
Welcome,
Honorable
Owen.
Mayor, Council, thank you guys so much for having me tonight. Like Director Wade mentioned, a couple weeks ago I was in front of you discussing future communications efforts and what we can do to sort of enhance our public visibility and grab the attention of some people. Councilor Lockhart, we really took to heart the video you showed us of the Fort Collins agenda, and so we kind of went ahead and developed some of our own fun ideas. With Director Wade's blessing, I went ahead and made a couple of memes that we're looking for your support in publishing over the next week to promote our May 13th and 14th City Council meetings and work sessions. So, yeah, Ryan, if you want to move to the next one. Oh.
Oh, yes. All right. That's hilarious. Yeah.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed those, but I would also like to show you guys, we put together a little video as well, a little bit of a satirical take, and sort of went for, one of those ASPCA commercial vibes, but in a satire form. So with that.
Every year, the Laramie budget is misjudged, misunderstood, misquoted on Facebook. Some say it's wasting money. Others claim it's hiding millions in a secret vault beneath City Hall. One guy swears it's just vibes and a coin toss. But the truth is, most people simply don't know how it works. Not because they don't care, but because no one's ever shown them the facts. But now, you can change that. On May 13th and 14th, come to the Laramie City budget meetings. Ask questions. See where your money actually goes. Witness the thrilling, edge-of-your-seat action of municipal finance. Because the budget isn't just numbers. It's parks. It's streets. It's emergency services. It's your Laramie. Don't rely on rumor. Don't let Facebook raise your property taxes. Take a breath of fresh air and try something new. Show up, be informed, and give the budget the love it's been waiting for.
So I'm glad you guys all like those. It sounds like we do, in fact, have your support. So be on the lookout next week. A couple of these will be going up. I'm glad that I was able to make you guys laugh tonight. Congratulations. Thank you.
Please, are there any comments? And I'll start with Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. We're all laughing because it's funny, but it's an attention grabber, and that's what we're trying to do, is grab people's attention and be transparent. So adding the humor in there to get our point across that it's a serious issue, I think you accomplished all that. So thank you for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Bowling did a thumbs up. And B. Hill, so thank you very much. And welcome, Director Wade.
Good evening, officially, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I do want to digress for just one more moment, if I can, and just say that when we talked to Owen about this initially, Spencer and he said, I have been waiting to have this kind of fun. And I just think he did such a great job. And so I just wanted to give him that shout out. He said he has a desktop full of city memes that he is just waiting to get out there. So we will dive into the budget this evening, starting out with the fund that is the most nuanced, and so it is a great place to start. It's our general fund. I'm going to try something different this year. I prepared a little bit of presentation just to help highlight some components of the budget book that are just harder to see in all of the text. And so this evening I'm going to experiment with the presentation and some references back to the book. I do think it's really important, council members, members of the public who may be watching, that you do dive into that budget book. There is a wealth of information there. However, I know it can be long and intimidating, and so I'd love some feedback as I go along or after the work session tonight on if this worked and if this is something that you'd like us to continue doing. So we will start off with fund financial position or fund balance. Can I? Excellent. The first thing I wanted to do is just make sure that everyone understands what we mean when we say financial position. And so I'm really challenging myself as I use terms to take a beat, see if that's something that everyone will understand, and if not, explain it. And so with financial position, I thought we might want to dive a little deeper. Financial position is an indicator of financial health in both government and business alike. So this is a concept many people may be familiar with. It's often represented on a balance sheet because because it goes beyond period revenue and expenditures to consider assets, liability, and equity. Now, equity in most of our government funds is called fund balance. And so when you hear fund balance, think equity. Assets minus liabilities equals equity is the basic equation. In government budgeting, what we want to remember is that fund balance is returned to citizens through investments in services. And so, of course, you have period revenue that's being invested in those services, period expenditures, but you can have also fund balance that gets invested in services. If you're going to invest reserves or fund balance in services, those should probably be one-time initiatives because you're really tapping in beyond those period revenues and expenses. Are there any questions before I move on to the next slide? I want to talk a little bit about sustainability in government budgeting because I think this is one of the matters that members of the public, even I, probably most fear when we think about government budgeting is, is a government going to go bankrupt? Do they have to borrow crushing amounts of debt to finance their operations? We don't do that in Wyoming, but that is a thing. And so when you talk about government budgeting in your local community, there's so much misunderstanding because there are practices that are pretty prevalent that can cause a lot of consternation about how maybe a local body plans for use of its resources. Sustainability is a concept that the city of Laramie has been committed to formally since 2017, and because I would argue we're a resource-constrained community historically for forever. It's just that it became an initiative in around 2017. When we talk about sustainability, we're really talking about the ability of each fund's ongoing resource inflows to pay for its ongoing resource outflows. We call that structural balance. A budget can be balanced using, reserves, one-time revenue, but that does not make it sustainable. So as an example, we have a lot of one-time revenue right now from wind energy development. What if I were to forecast for that revenue, include that revenue in how we're funding our budget, not disclose it? That's not a balanced, sustainable budget, is it? Because we know that revenue isn't going to continue. That's really what sustainability is about, and we're going to talk a lot about that this evening. Sustainable budgets use reserves intentionally. So you will see at the city, we use reserves for one-time initiatives, meaning capital investment primarily, but we also can use reserves for other one-time initiatives. And you'll notice in your budget book this year, we have disclosed to you the amount of the supplemental budget that is one-time versus ongoing to help you evaluate whether you think the recommendation is sustainable. Sustainable budgets are also more nimble in response to economic downturns. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on, but you're going to see that I actually forecasted property taxes lower than what they ended up being by about $80,000 because we knew these cuts were coming and we had been planning for them. So sustainable budgets are not reactive. They are thoughtful, and you actually put a lot of time into making sure, in particular, that those revenue estimates are as good as your expenditure estimates. And finally, sustainable budgets plan over multiple periods. So you're going to see in the capital plans, even though we're not going to probably spend a lot of time on the out years plans this year because it's the second year of a biennium, that we're really planning for the long term. As many of you know, in our utility services, we are planning for a 10-year period for capital, and that actually is what ends up before you. So lots of stuff that goes behind what makes our budget sustainable in our opinion, but we want to really talk about that so that you can make your own determinations. The Government Finance Officers Association, that's my primary professional association, says the following things about sustainability in addition to the things I've already discussed. Sustainable budgets would meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet needs. Sustainable budgets would use resources effectively. Sustainable budgets would go beyond balancing to achieving that structural balance. And so a lot of these principles that Laramie has woven into its budgeting process are actually professional best practices promulgated by some of our larger professional organizations based on lots of knowledge of how public finance works and how budgets are best and most sustainably developed. So let's talk about if our general fund budget is sustainable, because that's the topic this evening. I've got four kind of markers here that can help us determine how sustainable that budget is, and we'll maybe have a little bit of discussion after I go over this slide to think about how we feel about this. So first, I only forecasted ongoing sales and use tax collections when for the general fund, so we don't have a risk of wind energy development tanking and us not having resources and having grown government in a way that makes us then contract, which is really not planning. It's just reaction. It's not disciplined at all. We are using up to $1.7 million of the direct distribution to fund operating costs. Now, we're going to talk more about the direct distribution later, but this is our most volatile source of state funding. This is still a rather small amount of that funding source, but we do want to disclose that we are using this. We were also using it last year. We are not using it more than forecasted last year. But this is actually the item that gives me the most concern, and I know the city manager as well. Property tax reductions were already included in our forecast for the entire biennium, like I said, at an amount greater than the actual reduction by $80,000. So I was pretty close. And so when the city manager was making decisions last year about the biennium budget, we were already taking into account those revenue reductions. And finally, you'll see in the budget book that we have documented that reserves are only invested in capital spending and not operating costs. And so we're going to go into these items in more detail, but are there any discussions or comments or observations you want to have about this slide and the sustainability of the budget that's before you this evening?
Councilors, questions or comments? Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. Just for my own edification, can you give me an example recently of a capital spending or investment through reserve, just for context?
So the Honorable Mayor, through you, I guess it's a work session, so it's a little different than that. And so because they're pooled resources and not specifically assigned, what we do is we make sure that the amount of reserves we're using does not exceed the capital investment less capital revenue. So it's a net number. And so you could look at a lot of our fleet investments, for example, as being funded with one-time reserves, although you could also look at a capital project. So as long as that you don't want that number for reserves to exceed the amount of your net capital investment. That's how we look at it.
Follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to sometimes, fleet is a very useful tool for me because it's helpful to be able to point to that when people are asking what that means. Myself being one of those people included. I think as we move forward, the more opportunities to have sort of a concrete example, even if it's in the hypothetical, is helpful for us in ongoing messaging.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. I love your presentations because I always feel like I learn so much. And so, one, just a comment and observation, it's pretty amazing that we were able to forecast the property tax reductions. And my only question, and maybe this is more for the city manager, is can you talk about that process? And is that just being involved with WHAM or the state legislature, and then you're able to discern those through, looking at historical data, or just kind of how you're able to be so effective in that? Thanks.
Yeah, you do know what's coming down the pipeline. I mean, we all live in Wyoming, and so we know what's been coming down the pipeline for property taxes. And so what you're probably going to do is take your forecast from where you think you're going to end the previous year, and then you're going to shave a certain amount off of that, and you're going to kind of adjust for maybe increases in property value, but then there was some additional legislation that shaved some off of that. And so it's not a precise science, but you understand the political dynamic and you understand the behavior of those revenue sources over time and the underlying valuation driver. And so it really is not difficult.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on that question just a little bit. When you were looking at that in forecasting, I'm assuming taking into account the property taxes for the wind, how difficult was that? Because those property taxes will continue to come our way, right, for the wind actual property. So is that helpful? Was that difficult to?
So you will never, those are things, so I'm sure that County Assessor Matthews, when she's forecasting Vice Mayor Richardson, she would know all of that. We don't know that. So we are making a much broader swath, but remember that property taxes are only 7% of our budget. And so we can forecast with reliable accuracy for something like property tax without the core underlying data, which is what you're talking about, because our threshold's a little bit smaller. If it was a larger percent of our budget, we would have to have that to come in with reasonable accuracy. Yeah.
Further question or comment? Oh, City Manager.
Thank you. If I can just add a little bit to address both of those questions. So Director Wade does a fantastic job with the numbers, and I really appreciate as well the professional relationship she's developed with the county and the assessor to try to get the best forecast we can on revenue numbers. To your question, Councilor Freed, I will say, and Jen did mention, we're always monitoring the political landscape, right? So those things are very helpful. I do have to give a shout out to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities and our participation on that board. It is important to help us read that landscape of Wyoming's political future. And Director Wade and I talk a lot when I'm working with WHAM about what I see coming, and she's also monitoring that as well. To your question, Councilor Richardson, with respect to property tax increasing permanently or not related to wind energy development, I will ask Jen to correct me if she sees it differently, but as I understand, we are seeing right now some one-time collections that we expect will not be permanently greater than what is normal in the realm of sales and use tax, right? However, when it comes to property tax, we may see some long-standing ongoing increases in property tax revenue as those wind farm lands have become permanently improved by the installation of the wind farm. So I just want to pick up those two pieces.
Seeing no further, Councilor Shumway.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this week, I went into the assessor's office to ask questions about property tax because I'd been hearing things all over the place. I don't think it's going to be the same impact as the potential. And the reason is because you have to be over 65 right now to apply for a 50% reduction on your property tax. And you have to either do it online or else go in person to the assessor's office and do it before the fourth Monday in May. And it's an annual thing. You have to do it over and over. Personally, I don't think that there's many people over 65 that are real good at going online and filling out applications. Also, many people are too old to take the time or effort to go to the assessor's office to fill it out, and it's also something that has to be renewed annually. So I think that there is a potential, and then there's an actual. And my guess is the actual will be much less than what the potential loss of revenue to the county and the city is going to be.
Okay, Director Wade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll talk a little bit more about property tax later on because I know it's a matter of a lot of interest for people, and so I'm going to save some follow-up for that conversation. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into sustainability and financial position and pop over to the budget book. And the reason I want to do this is I'm hoping to pique the interest of the council and members of the public who may be watching so that you read this section of the budget book in particular. If you would be kind enough to go to page 22 in the budget book. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you so much. So on 22, we kick off the disclosures for the general fund. We launch right into financial position. And the reason I want to start off on this very text-heavy page is to tell you I think there's some really good historical information here that's going to support some graphs I'm about to show you. Laramie's budget is not sustainable because it just happened. And in fact, until 2017, we were actually not structurally balanced. In 2017, the city manager made some very difficult decisions to shrink services and to hold them at that reduced level until other revenue sources had grown enough to still have a sustainable budget. And so what you've seen over time are little bits of additions back in a way that still helps us achieve that structural balance. But that's why I wanted to stop here and say there's some great history for new council members of the public who may not know on this page that kind of just interprets the charts on the next page. If we could go to page 23 now. And so you'll recall in our initial work session, is there a pointer?
There should be one on that.
Do I just like push this?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
It will show up on the screen.
Yeah, it may not. So I will draw your attention to the chart called operating revenue versus expenditures. And I know it's not going to be all that easy to see on this screen, but this chart is really the one that shows us if our ongoing resource inflows and our ongoing resource outflows are balanced in relationship to each other. The blue line represents revenue, the orange line represents expenses. And so you can see since 2017, when those sustainability adjustments were done, that we have had structural balance in our operations. You can see prior to that time the gap between those two, which represents to you the depth of the adjustments that were made at that time. And so again, very much not a coincidence. I also want to point out that shoot up in revenue, those are sales and use tax collections from wind energy development. I don't take them out here for the historical reporting, even though I don't forecast them in budget. Because I think it's important that you be able to see them. The next, if you could scroll a little bit further down on the page, you're going to see a chart that shows total revenue and expenditures. So this is where our total budget, all capital expenditures included, so all capital projects, street work, parks, fleet, those types of things, including our operating costs, which remember include personnel, operating supplies, contractual services, things of that nature. So everything in the budget, all together, actuals, you can still see that our total revenue line is hovering above our total expenditures. And you can see those big gaps created by those one-time collections, which are actually being appropriated after the fact and creating reserves in the meantime. We're going to talk about reserves later on because I know that we in the general fund have way more than we have ever had historically in Laramie. And so we want to make sure that people understand why we have those and our plan for reinvestment in the community. If we could go to page 24. Here, I just want to point out that on this page, if you're interested, you can see my projections for 2025, and both for revenue and expenditures. What I want to point out for the council is that our normal sales and use tax collections in 2022 were around $14 million. In 2025, we will end at least $20 million. That is the magnitude of the one-time collections we are experiencing. It is in the millions of dollars, and that is, again, why our reserves are building so much, because we are never going to appropriate that in the year it's happening. That would be poor decision-making in my professional opinion. So we'll go back to the presentation. Yes.
I have a question. Councilor O'Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that the wind development is the north of the county, but every time somebody hears about wind, they assume it has to do with the south of town. So I just thought we should clarify for the public that it's the wind development in the north part of the county. And then, is that right? And then we get a portion of that because they pay sales tax that comes to the county and gets distributed. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Honorable Mayor, I have to be honest and say that the Department of Revenue does not tell us who the vendors are and what the projects are that derive the sales and use tax. So we know the industry, we know the sector. And so we know it's wind, and I don't know if the city manager can speak to which project it is.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Doherty, there are a number of projects going on in Albany County, both north and south, and a little bit west, I believe, as well, in the form of I think it's the Intermountain West transmission line for wind energy. There's a good handful of them. I do not remember the name of all of them. I think there's 5 or 6 projects of varying size.
Director?
Thank you.
Continue.
I do appreciate that the council is just asking questions. Please continue to do so. All right, cool. Now I want to talk briefly about some major sources of general fund revenue, just so you get a feel for how this fund is different than other funds in the city. So let's talk about our operating funds in comparison. So when I say operating, I mean general fund, the rec center fund, water fund, wastewater fund, solid waste fund, and the new surface water drainage fund. So our operating funds provide most of our basic services, so they're not a specific capital fund or anything like that. This is where most of your services are originating. The general fund is different than all other operating funds in the city in one regard, which is that most of its revenue does not come from user charges. All other funds' revenue comes from user charges, which, as the council might know, you set the rates for. And so we control the amount of the revenue coming into these funds, typically through 10-year plans. We use 10-year plans because certainly with infrastructure-intensive operations, we do not want to correct and put huge rates on people and have to adjust way up and then be reactive in that way. And so we're looking for ways to minimize the rate impact actually over a 10-year period to achieve the financial investment that the plan says that we need. That does not happen in the general fund. 75 to 80% of the revenue comes from intergovernmental sources that the city does not control. I also want to note, we'll talk a little bit more about this next week, that these sources reflect Wyoming's structure for local government funding. What I'm telling you is that Laramie is not special, and that resources from mineral producers and sales and use taxes are the largest receipts, because that is how Wyoming's government funding is set up. The top 4 sources of general fund revenue, I had to do a little bit of pooling here, but I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. 44% is from sales and use taxes. That is both the 4th cent tax that is a state tax. Remember, that's a state tax that we receive about 30% of, and the 5th cent local optional general purpose tax that our voters approve. So that 44% is both of those taxes. 14% of our revenue comes from what I'm going to call mineral production, federal mineral royalties, severance taxes, and the direct distribution, which is funded from over-the-cap collections of both federal mineral royalties and severance taxes. 10% of our general fund budget are from various forms of user charges, and 8% are from both property and auto taxes. I could have actually excluded property and auto taxes here and included other intergovernmental revenue because it was also about 8%. But I thought the public might be a little bit more interested in this category, and it was just slightly more. Those other intergovernmental sources are things like gas and special fuels tax, our various grants with the state of Wyoming, lottery, those types of things.
I have a question from Councilor Newman.
The 8%, do you know the split between property and auto?
Yes, property is about 2.4 million and auto is maybe just right under 7, if I'm remembering that right. 700,000. Thank you. Sorry, I'm talking like a fast budget person. Okay. Are there any more questions on this slide? So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into revenue using that budget book. So Deputy Clerk, if you could go to page 28. And I actually gave you the wrong page number. Could we please go to page 26? Thank you for that. So starting on page 26, you'll find some introductory graphs that show you a little bit about the general fund revenue. You're going to see exactly what I just told you in a little bit different format that was maybe a little more user-friendly, that about 75 to 80% is intergovernmental in nature. You'll also see some cool line graphs that show you the change in that revenue over time. The graph I really want to focus on is at the bottom of the second column. It's intergovernmental revenue trends. I would like for you to notice the relative stability in most of those lines, and then the high amount of variability in sales and use tax, particularly the spike up that we've been talking about this evening. If we could go to page 26, I'm sorry, 27. I'd like to show you that there are statutory references that describe what each of these taxes actually are. And so just to remind you all again, the 4th cent, that's the state shared tax, about 30% comes back to Laramie, a little bit over that maybe. It's reliably actually around 30%. And the 5th cent is that really important local optional tax that is general purpose that we use to fund a big component of the general fund operations. You'll also see some information here on the 6th cent. As you know, our 6th cent is, you probably know, collecting a lot faster because of the wind energy development. It will likely be up for re-election in somewhere between, let's say, early summer to late summer next year. And this tax in particular, the structure of the last one, entirely benefited general fund operations because general fund resources on their own are not sufficient to fund capital investment in Laramie. And so this tax is critically important to our ability to invest in capital. And so that's why you see, for example, 22 million of that last tax going to streets. So just as an example, for some of our newer council members. You'll also see on this page reference to the 7th cent. Of course, we don't have the 7th cent. No one in Wyoming does, meaning 7 cents of tax, not the 7th cent as some people talk about it. But we want to make sure that you know it's out there and no one has adopted it. On the next page,
Councilor Schoenmeier.
Thank you, Your Honor. Director Wade, I have a question about the 6th cent. You indicated that it may expire, let's say, July of 2026. We can't renew it until November of 2026 with an election. What do we do in the meantime when it's been fully, when that's been satisfied? What do we do between July and November with the collections on the 6th cent? Does it go back to 5%? Or do we continue to do over collections? How does that work?
Honorable Mayor, through you,
Director.
I have had conversations with the county. We can't have a tax at a different time. We can have I know we can have an election in August, and I believe they've even talked about, if we had to, an election a little bit earlier than that. And so we're kind of following the county's lead in that regard. And so one of the things that we would want to try to make sure of is that the tax doesn't lapse in between. And I think that's everyone's goal. It's just a little hard to tell where it's going to come in this year. So county folks are already thinking about that and when they're going to have that election. Right now, they're saying August of 2026. But I know when I talked to the treasurer earlier, she had even mentioned May if needed. So we should be able to avoid that, I think. So on this next page, what I really want to point out is that if you could scroll down just a little bit to the sales and use tax slide where you see the bar graph, and I want to show you how our sales and use taxes languished. They absolutely languished for most of my career here, really. From 2011 when I started until 2021, this thing happened. And we got some wind energy development money, and we had this little spike. And we thought, is this going to continue? And in 2022, it didn't. Like, it kind of went away. And so we thought, well, okay, it's just a blip. We've seen these blips before. And then it's just kept right on coming. I would suspect that we have another couple of years where this might be reliable unless things happen to deter it. But we don't have a crystal ball in that regard. But internally we're saying, well, we probably can bank on another year or two. unless some things start to happen. But we actually don't know is the real answer. And it makes it really tough when the Department of Revenue does just hold on to that data and you can't get at the root of it. And they're super helpful. I'm not complaining. I think it's just what they can release and what they can't release. And so we are not planning like this is going to happen for 5 or 10 years. That's what I'm telling you. If it does, well then, that's awesome. But we're not thinking it is. What I also want to point out to you is the per capita sales and use tax collection chart, which is on the second column, the right-hand column, if you're looking at the page. Albany County for the first time is in the median. I have never seen this. I don't believe your city manager has ever seen this either. But what I want to tell you is that when we back out those one-time collections, we're fourth from the bottom, which is our natural place on this graph. So we did do that analysis, but I felt it would not be fair to present it in that way. I disclosed it via text, but I want you to know that I don't want to create any false hope or illusions about where we're going to land here long term. So if we could go to page 29. 29 is the disclosure on property taxes. So we talk about that the budget before you has the full 8 mills of city tax included in it. That's at $2.4 million in revenue. That number before the reduction would have been something probably like 3.3. But remember, we've had 2 years of reductions now, and that's where we're landing at this time. It also discloses to you the rates of taxation, which some users may find helpful. And I've also put together a summary of the pieces of legislation that have had the most impact on property taxes, and reminding people of the People's Ballot Initiative that will be on the general election in 2026. If that measure passes, we will see a 50% reduction in property taxes. I took a look at the way that language is written right now, and that would actually require enrollment, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. So there's a little bit of an administrative burden. I don't know if that'll stay or go, but I do know that when I was listening to legislative discussions this last year, various legislators were bringing up the need to have some repeal of the 25% reduction if the 50% passes. So I believe the plan, if I'm understanding it correctly, is to see how the initiative turns out. If the 50% passes, then the 25% reduction would be removed. And so at this time, that's how we're operating. Yeah.
Vice Mayor Richardson.
Thank you. Could you just, sorry, one more time, I didn't catch that, share the difference, 2.4 million from 3.3 million?
My best guess of what property tax would be this year in the forecast, had the past 2 years of reductions not been enacted, is around 3.3 million. And I believe I have forecasted something like 2.45, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So this section of the book really does go over the various intergovernmental revenue sources. The reason I think this is important for the council to read and for members of the public to read is that you get a sense of the various taxes that are paying for general fund services. One of the things you'll notice when we go over the budget in brief next week is we tried to actually say, like, what's the net cost of government, because I think there's a real desire for people to know what their taxes are paying for. But the thing about it is we have to define what your taxes are. And so we've tried to do that in the budget in brief. I don't know if we've done a good job. We'd love some feedback, but we're really trying to get at that question. But the reality is that a lot of the revenue in the general fund actually does come from things that are pretty far removed from many of our local residents. And so some interesting conversations to be had there around getting at that root of what do my taxes pay for. I also think it's really important. You saw that revenue from mineral production, that's what I'm going to call it, is the second largest source of revenue in our general fund. We really wouldn't think that about Laramie, but it is truth because of how Wyoming government budget is funded. So I think it's important for people to understand, for example, that severance tax is a tax levied by the state on mineral producers for the extraction of oil, gas, and minerals. The state retains a portion of that tax, and they distribute a capped amount, a maximum of $155 million, back to local communities. And they do it in a variety of formulas. And over the cap collections go into various pots. One of those pots is money for the direct distribution. I also think it's important, if we could go to the next page, for people in western states to understand federal mineral royalties. And so if you really want to nerd out on this, I think you can go to it's called the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920. I had never found this before, and I got super interested this year in it because I thought, are we alone in this? And the fact of the matter is we're not. And that many western states actually have a significant component of their budgets funded through these mineral leasing revenues, which, I mean, Wyoming and New Mexico, in fact, are the biggest recipients of some of these federal mineral royalties. And so these mineral royalties are paid by mineral producers to lease and extract resources from federally owned land. And the lease agreement to extract resources and remit royalty payments based on actual production, it's typically 12.5%, is between the mineral producer and the federal government, and then those funds are returned back to the state. And so that's how that whole thing works. And the direct distribution is funded with over-the-cap collection. So Wyoming also set a cap on the distribution of federal mineral royalties a fair amount of time ago now. I think it was early 2000s. And that's how the direct distribution is funded. And so the direct distribution is the next source of revenue I'm going to talk about in detail, and then we're just going to talk about the forecast. So this direct distribution, did you?
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. So is that direct distribution that comes from states, is that where that funding might change per state and how their state legislature decides to use that funding?
Honorable Mayor, the direct distribution is it's a Wyoming thing, all of these things. So the idea of severance tax or the idea of federal mineral royalties are common to western states. How those funds are distributed varies from state to state. And so as we're talking about it now, this is all Wyoming specific. And so this direct distribution has been a significant source for Laramie and many local governments in Wyoming over time. For Laramie, it was a particularly important source because we were a revenue challenged or hardship community because our sales and use tax collections were down in that low 4 per capita, in Wyoming. And so this direct distribution, which, has ranged historically anywhere from $3.5 million to $6.5 million, is a pretty key source of revenue for Laramie. The issue with the direct distribution is it's subject to an awful lot of formula changes and legislative action. And sometimes it comes with special notes about what you can use it for and not use it for. And so we have considered this historically an unreliable source of revenue for a big component of operating cost. And so if you remember my sustainability slide, this is the one risk we have. We're using a small enough amount of it that, it's low risk, but it is still a revenue source that is less reliable than others that we get. If we could go to page 32. So on page 32, you're going to see a chart that shows you how the direct distribution has changed over time. What I want you to notice in 2024 is that we hit the high water mark. And so in addition to all of our one-time sales and use tax collections, we have these very large direct distributions, which what is that doing to reserves? So that's also a reason that our reserves have increased in the general fund, because we do use this primarily for one-time sources. And so really good context here, probably worth reading about the direct distribution, because it will come up, it'll come up in the interim in committee work for this legislative session. Lastly, if we could go to page 33, and the bottom of page 33 in the table. So on page 33, you'll see my detailed revenue forecast by category. I want to take a beat and just pause on a couple of things. You'll see that the sales and use tax, the property tax forecast is $2.45 million, which is what I quoted earlier. That auto tax is right at $700,000. Those were areas where I spent a lot of time checking my assumptions, making sure I felt comfortable. $2.45 million is probably right around where we're going to come in. We'll come in slightly higher than that, but not very much. That's really my goal, is to come in maybe 3% under where I think we're actually going to land. I also want to show you that reiterate that our 4th cent sales and use tax collections do not include any one-time amounts. And so these large adjustments that you see here, these are all amounts that we expect to be ongoing. I am disclosing in the budget document my assumptions for growth. I believe those assumptions are something like 2 2.5% this year and 2% next year, so conservative assumptions. But certainly if the economy tanks or something, these forecasts can be wrong, but we try to be conservative enough without limiting operations to make sure we achieve those numbers. I want to also point out that the direct distribution is going down $1.5 million. That is entirely due to variations in our sales and use tax. So a couple of years ago, there was a formula change that decreased the hardship component from 10% to 5%, and also kind of refunneled additional direct distribution resources to communities that had less volatility in sales and use tax. So we had a banner year in sales and use tax, and our direct distribution dropped by $1.5 million. That's what we can expect with this formula, and that will be ongoing, regardless of our per capita sales and use tax collections.
Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. Can you just, what are franchise taxes? I know that's maybe a rudimentary question, but would you just touch on that?
I would be happy to, but I want to go back to I want to make sure that I say it correctly. They're paid in exchange for using public rights-of-way within city limits to construct, maintain, and operate utility infrastructure.
Thank you.
So I want to go to page 34 and talk about the other few key changes in the revenue forecast. So I'll point out, you'll notice a big reduction in the IMH ambulance lease, and so we will continue providing services through September the 1st. My revenue forecast does account for that, as well as the additional revenue from the new service agreement of $920,000. And so we were very pleased with the consultant to learn that the consultant's first estimate of revenue was pretty much spot on with the numbers we have been using based on the actual 911 calls. And so we're getting a lot of positive affirmation that our, let's just call it our profit and loss statement that we had developed to help us make this business decision was valid. And so that's what you're seeing in the revenue forecast here. I thought you might be interested in that. The other thing I want to point out is that while our interest earnings are actually quite higher than I have forecasted here, I forecasted a rather low amount because, again, I don't want to load any funds into the budget and the revenue forecast that might not be ongoing. And so if the rate of interest changes, because we're pretty restricted in what we can invest, I think we're going to have some conversations later in the year about our investments. But if that interest rate changes, we certainly don't want to be relying on that interest revenue to fund our core operating services. And so that forecast is conservative as well. And then going back to the presentation, I've got just one more slide. Okay. So let's talk about the risk to revenue in the future, because that definitely influences sustainability. We've hit on a lot of these already. So number one risk, most certain risk, so this is from probably most certain to least certain, are continued property tax reductions. We all know what those are. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Those are definitely decisions of the Wyoming state government and legislature and Wyoming voters. We don't have any control over that. What we're going to do is we're going to plan for the future. We're going to plan assuming that this source is going to contract and make sure that we still have a sustainable budget regardless, which is what we've done to date. Second highest risk of loss is in the direct distribution. So the Wyoming Association of Municipalities has already advised that potential reductions are going to be discussed in this next year. And so we are expecting that to potentially go down, which is why we're making sure that we are using what we consider to be a safe amount of it to fund ongoing costs. But we'll need to see what happens with those discussions. And those are, of course, decisions of the Wyoming state government, which means our legislature. Third, potential statewide tax reform. Some of you may know that there was a tax reform bill that actually was discussed prior to the session starting last year. Really hard to tell what that would do for Laramie. My first read of what was on the table last year, if it had passed as it was, which we all know that probably wouldn't have been likely, was that it might have been neutral or slightly favorable to Laramie. And so I don't want to give you the impression that I think that that's a bad thing, but it is a big uncertainty uncertainty and a risk, and that's what I want to document here. And then finally, potential reduced federal revenue for Wyoming based on decisions of the federal government. So if something were to change with those federal mineral leases, if the amount of grants goes away, that will trickle down to Laramie. The grant piece trickles down to Laramie in a pretty minimal way in the general fund. That would affect some of our other funds more, but the federal mineral royalty piece would certainly affect the general fund.
Councilor Vigil?
Thank you, Mayor. Out of all four of these risks, which are you most worried about and why, do you think?
I would say at this point the first two, because they're the most likely. I don't know if I feel worried about statewide tax reform. I think that topic has been on the docket for discussion for a long time, and there's no reason to assume carte blanche that would be negative for Laramie. But the way it's gone about is really important, that it's well thought. Those are big economic decisions, and so I don't really know if I have a feeling about that. It's just a risk. I know that was a little bit slower than I normally go, but I hope that was helpful in terms of actually giving you a real introduction to these revenue sources in a fund that is pretty complex and in a fund that I'm sure you get plenty of questions about as a council that you wish you could answer. And so if you have any additional questions, just let me know.
Questions or comments, councilors? Councilor Bowling?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. Would it be possible to share that PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
That we can, as I'm spending my Saturday, combing through the general fund, be helpful to refer back to it. Thank you.
We'd be happy to.
Yes. Any others? Councilor O'Doherty.
I was thinking streets is one of our big that's general fund and capital. It would come from capital reserves. So we need to save up that money when a big project like Wyoming Avenue and all, takes a lot, right? That's it. Because other things like water and sewer, they're coming from enterprise funds.
Okay, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're going to switch gears and stop talking about inputs and talk about outputs, how we spend these resources on behalf of the community. So I am going to provide an overview of the supplemental recommendation that we will be discussing for the next number of meetings. I'm going to start in your workbook on page 3. Page 3 in the workbook. And page 3 is my transmittal letter to the governing body. It provides really just some high-level overview. So if I can, I'll just touch here and let you know that the adjustments that I'm recommending for the second year of the biennium are really pretty modest, and they're largely driven by inflationary increases in expenses related to the cost of operating city government. There you go, Ryan. Thank you. I do want to just take a second to touch on some of the more notable recommendations that I am making for you, and I was pleased to hear Administrative Services Director Wade talk about reserves because they pertain to reserves. So first and foremost, I am going to recommend this year that the council formally commit $14 million from unallocated reserve to improve pavement conditions and address the backlog of maintenance that we have in the street system. We recently completed the pavement condition index analysis, and the overall rating of your street system is 58 out of 100, which is a fair condition. I don't want to talk in great detail about this because we will touch on streets more when the Public Works Department comes up, but I will just let you know, if you concur with my recommendation to commit the $14 million, that married to the $6 million, which has already been approved for the biennium, will bring to a total of $20 million. The investment that we can make in your paved street system over the next 2 to 3 construction season cycles, and that is, of course, assuming that we're able to get sufficient private contractors on board to conduct that work in that 2 to 3 year period. I am also recommending that you formally commit $5 million to a new program. Again, this $5 million would come from unallocated reserve. What I'm recommending is a program of economic development where we would establish a pilot program for housing enabling municipal infrastructure. I've developed a program concept around this that would prioritize build-ready construction projects that have demonstrated financial capacity to bring new housing units into the market at attainable prices. And attainable, we discuss a lot in here, but generally what that means is that the individuals paying the mortgage are not paying more than 30% of their annual income. That's considered an attainable mortgage rate metric. The source of the funds for this Housing Ready program would be from investment earnings. And I have to give a nod, largely, not entirely, but I'll get into detail in a minute. But before I go there, I want to give a nod to Director Wade, who does manage what investments the city has, and with interest rates the way they've been, she's made great decisions, and we have some interest earnings in our utility funds. So this is the only time I'm going to talk about non-general fund tonight. But in the water fund and in the wastewater fund, we do have some investment earnings. I'm recommending $1 million from investment earnings in wastewater and $2 million from water to be used for this housing enabling infrastructure. And the reason that's important, and I want to talk about the source of these monies, is, as you know, our utility funds are built on user fees. So we all in this room, we pay water rates and we pay sewer rates. It's always been a question of fairness and use of funds. If we were to take money, pool them as a community in those user fees, and then return them to a developer who may make a profit off that housing, right? And so there starts to be equity questions there. My hope is that by designating the source of these funds as investment earnings, that we move away from that equity discussion. And we will talk more about this as well during the water and wastewater fund. And so the $2 and $1 million I just discussed, that $3 million from utility funds could be married with $2 million from sales and use tax one-time collections in the general fund, that we believe the source of that is really this wind energy development that we've been talking about. And then the third and last sort of notable recommendation for you is I am recommending that the council authorize a 3% pay plan cost of living adjustment for our classified positions. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few slides as well. So if you don't mind, I'll set that aside. Any questions before I move to the presentation, and knowing that I'm going to talk a lot more about this a little bit tonight and then throughout the subsequent meetings in coming weeks?
Councilor Shumway.
City Manager, would you clarify whether or not we are taking money from an enterprise fund and moving it to a housing fund?
Through you, Mayor, Councilor Shumway, no, it would be a program. So we wouldn't be moving money from the enterprise fund to the general fund unless Jen decides that's the best way to account for it. But we would be using monies from those enterprise funds for this housing infrastructure enabling program. Did I answer your question, or just make it muddier?
Follow up?
Could I ask for clarification?
Yes.
Would that be monies that is in a reserve for an enterprise fund being borrowed, or would it be money that would be used and not returned?
It would be one-time expenditures that are approved by the City Council. The source of those funds would be interest earned on investments from unallocated reserve.
City Manager, continue.
Thank you for the question. I think we're ready to go to the PowerPoint. So we're going to be directly in general fund now, and as Jen said, this is our most complex fund. It funds governmental operations. only. The supplemental recommendations in your workbook begin on page 39. The adopted budget for the fiscal year starting July 1st that has already been approved by council is $39 million. The total net supplemental recommendation is $2 million. Within that, you can see what the adjusted fiscal 26 budget will look like in the pie chart if you approve those recommendations. In total, about 45% of all of the expenditures in the general fund will be made in the police and fire department, EMS, and dispatch center. And then you can see the remaining amounts in the pie chart. Touching on personnel, I am recommending 1 permanent job be added in the general fund, and a handful of temporary jobs, 5 FTE, would be eliminated or discontinued along with the civilian paramedic program. I would remind the council that the civilian paramedic program as well as the civilian driver program in fire have never been permanent authorized FTEs of this organization. Council has only approved them as a temporary measure to bridge the gap between the conversion of patient transfer services to IMH. Next slide.
Councilor Shumway.
Obviously, we had some individuals that talked about the paramedic program. The question I have is, why is it that if they were being used for transporting, and Ivinson Hospital now is doing that, why wouldn't it be that they would utilize those paramedics or have something equivalent so that they wouldn't provide safety for people being transported from Laramie to other hospitals?
Mayor, through you, Councilor Shumway, we are going to move after I give this overview to fire. So if you don't mind, I'm going to note your question, and I can start off the fire section answering that, if that's okay.
Councilor Newman.
I will hold my question until the fire section.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
City Manager, continue, please.
Very good. So as we think about every single year when we look at budget, and you'll recall the work session that we had a few weeks ago where I talked about really the role of the city manager in evaluating budgets and working with departments, it's always front of mind for me that we are containing costs. Sometimes that means reducing, but sometimes that means just not letting them grow at a rate that we cannot afford. And that rate that we can afford is tied back to, of course, how quickly our revenue grows or does not grow, or how stagnant it is, and then also the inflationary increases in just the cost of doing business. So I wanted to break down a little bit for you what that $2 million adjustment that I'm recommending looks like. This content is contained on page 35 to 37 of your workbook. Of the $2 million, $500,000, roughly $239,000 would be ongoing. The remaining $1.5 million of that $2 million is only one-time or temporary expenses. The $508,000 ongoing amount is 1.3% more than the adopted budget, so a minor adjustment to what was adopted last year. Of that $508,000, $344,239 of it is just operating cost. And we will, on the supplemental pages, dive into the detail of what comprises all of these numbers, but I think you'll see a running theme when we get there of inflation is eating our lunch, basically, like it is for all businesses in the last few years. $120,000 of the $508,000 is generating return on investment of 150%. And $44,000 of the $508,000 is tied to fixed expenses where dry utility expense has gone up. This is electricity, this is natural gas, the same things that we're all experiencing in our homes and on our personal ledgers as well. In the temporary or one-time recommendation of $1.5 million, that is 3.8% over adopted budget from last year. $990,745 of those dollars is capital investment and related debt service and capital support transfer. $404,000 of it is personnel, again, one-time temporary, and $104,600 of it is ongoing operational, or excuse me, one-time operational costs. Any questions?
Counselor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I might have missed this, City Manager, so I apologize. But that $404,030 personnel is just a one-time or temporary adopted budget. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, we have, I mentioned on the previous slide that we have permanent authorized full-time equivalent positions that the council authorized. We also have some temporary positions that have been authorized. For instance, there is one temporary position that is approved by you for a period of time that will expire in the year. There are also temporary expenses approved for 3 firefighters, for instance, to be overhired beyond the authorized allowance that you've made to bridge the gap when we have exigent circumstances. So hopefully that helps.
Perfect. Thank you.
Continue. Okay, so I just have a couple more slides, and I wanted to dive a little bit into personnel costs, and I'll tell you why. And I just realized I forgot to bring Brandon up first, but this is a good point to bring him up too. The reason I wanted to talk for just a couple slides about the personnel cost is we as an organization have made some really notable investments really in personnel salaries. And we made that investment in February of 2024, so now just almost a little more than a year ago. City of Laramie bases our compensation on pay data for public sector jobs in our region. So in other words, we want our staff members to be paid comparably to professional peers outside of this organization in the region and also inside of our organization. So you wouldn't want 2 people sitting next to each other doing the same job getting different pay. If they're doing the same job in our organization, we want to pay them equally. We base our pay, and not just starting last February when we made a sizable adjustment, but always since I've been here. We've always based our pay on the market value of the skills, knowledge, and abilities necessary to perform the assigned duties and responsibilities of the job. You guys have all heard that before, right? That's sort of like the pay compensation philosophy rhetoric. But this is considered best practice, right? And this is why we hear this repeated across our own employers, because this is best practice. So after that February 2024 adjustment, the city, in my opinion, we are very well positioned to be competitive in our hiring and our retention of hopefully the best and brightest talent. Because our total compensation increase for the biennium is limited to 5% for our classified employee groups who are non-fire, our budget amendment is only necessary to fund that in the wastewater fund. All of our other funds, general fund, already has sufficient budget to sustain the 3% cost of living adjustment for fiscal 26. So I wanted to make that point. And I believe that that is important to maintain that competitive pay structure that we have right now, given the inflation that we've seen in the last 12 months, which has cooled down, but is still something that folks are reckoning with. To the next slide. So just as a reminder, we have 3 sort of groups of employees at the city. We have our classified, permanent, full-time, we call them non-CBA, non-collective bargaining agreement employees. They have a merit pay opportunity every other year, and as I've mentioned, the COLA of 3% would take effect July 1st. Classified collective bargaining agreement employees, this is your fire personnel, they have a merit pay opportunity every year if revenue is sufficient to support it, and per the collective bargaining agreement this year, they will receive a 5.5% cost of living adjustment July 1st. Then we have provisional part-time workers. They are, provisional meaning they are non-permanent, but we have many, many, many folks who work for us in this capacity. If you think of Parks and Recreation and Community Services Department, they, to a large degree, are the lifeblood of that department. Mosquito control in the summer, parks, recreation, pools. So the pay rate there is established by the department and hiring supervisor with HR, sort of providing background analysis on what the pay range should be for positions that are part-time. They do take into account the function and the job duties, like I said on the previous slide. So some of our part-time positions may be getting a higher hourly rate than other positions because of the duties and responsibilities of the position. But provisional part-time staff also can get merit-based increases at the supervisor's discretion. So for instance, if they maybe return for multiple summer seasons, pay can be adjusted to acknowledge that. Again, I wanted to emphasize, no budget amendment is necessary to sustain the COLA except in wastewater fund, nothing in general fund. So where you see that increase, most of it is in fact that temporary one-time change. And I took the deep dive a little bit there to explain some of that because we did do a budget survey this year, again, as you know. Brennan Moen is here, our management analyst. We didn't have time to go over it in detail tonight. The budget in brief that we're going to cover at the beginning of your next work session has some comparative data there to show you how the results of the survey compared to what is actually recommended here and what our historical trend has looked like compared to what people are hoping to see. So we will talk about that more next time. But in the meantime, I asked Brennan if he would be here tonight just to hand out to you the results so you can take a closer look at them. Then the brief information that you'll find in the budget and brief, and then you'll be well positioned if you have questions next session. So, Brandon, you want to come up and hand out?
So I don't have them currently on hand, but what I can do is shoot out an email right now.
Councilor Newman has a question.
So my question is actually for council. I wonder if council would entertain like a 5-minute kind of recess to, we've got so much data so fast.
Thank you. I was wondering the same thing. Shall we take 5?
I'm okay with that.
Is 5 adequate?
Like
5?
7:50?
So we'll see you at 7:50.
Brandon just got the vote.
survey, we asked a question in which we had several programs or departments throughout the city. It had a slider bar that users could allocate a certain fund of money, anything within the amount of the entire budget, 2 different programs as they see fit. We included the actual fiscal year 25 allocations so they could see where their allocation might stack up with the actual allocation in the budget. So this graph here, you should have a handout. If you don't, let me know. I have more. This is a graph demonstrating the differences between their allocations versus our actual fiscal year 25 allocation. To start off, funding was reduced by our respondents over the actual budget by over 10% for our 9/11 and police, our ICE and Event Center programs and services, and our Recreation Center programs and services, and that was by over 20%. Respondents reduced funding by just under 10% or less for our drinking water, wastewater, and solid waste. And just for that graph, the darker bar is the fiscal year 25 budget allocation. The light bar is our respondent allocation. So the mean average of each of those amongst all of our respondents. Respondents allocated over a 40% increase on average to communication with residents and economic development, and increased our other recreational programs by over 30%. Respondents increased funding by over 10% to streets and under 10% for parks, trails, and parks, trails, green spaces, that area, and other recreational programs. Funding to fire and EMS remained roughly the same between our budget and the respondent allocations.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brandon. You're likely going to cover this, but what is the total number of respondents?
217.
Yeah, there's a lot of data there that we could definitely cover, and I don't know how much we want to take on tonight, but.
Yeah, I'll let Brandon pull up the number. The intention was just to give you this slide because this is a little more detailed than the more fine-tuned piece in the budget and brief. At the budget and brief next work session, we'll kind of cover that, and Brandon will send you the entire data set in a digital handout so that you have that to prepare for the next work session. So we just wanted to touch on it, make you know that we're aware and that we have made those comparisons for tonight at least. And there were, I'm pretty sure it was 217 respondents, is that right?
Yeah, there were 217 survey completions.
Did that answer your question, Councilor Lockhart? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Okay, continue. Councilor Freed.
I just want to make a comment, thank you, Mayor, that Brandon did send that email to us, and it has that full breakdown that the city manager was just talking about. Thanks.
Thank you. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I would encourage you, as you look at that full handout, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to contact me or Brandon. We were like the lead on the project. He's certainly more knowledgeable about the details. So feel free to do that. And with that, if there are no other questions, I'll switch to fire.
Have a question from Councilor Newman.
Well, we will go over this PowerPoint at the next meeting, right?
Council, we will not go over this PowerPoint at the next meeting. We are handing it out to you, but we don't have enough time to incorporate an hour-long presentation on that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why we're giving you, I guess, homework.
Right. That's what I wanted clarification.
More homework, yes.
Councilor Shumway.
Before we go to fire, just again to clarify for me, the interest on the money that's going for housing from the enterprise fund, is that going for infrastructure for like water and sewer lines for housing?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Yes, yeah, maybe I was, okay, thank you. With that, I think we're ready to invite the fire chief up. I will give you some page number references, Council. The Supplemental recommendations for fire are contained on page 41 and 45. Chief Johnson will go over those. And then he'll move to page 63, which is the information for the fire department. He'll spend a few minutes telling you about accomplishments from last year and goals for the upcoming year. I wanted to address Councilor Shumway's question and invite the chief to add anything that he thinks is pertinent with respect to the paramedics. So the city of Laramie does have paramedics in our fire service. We will continue to have paramedics in our fire service, even with the discontinuation of the civilian paramedic program. And I did also have some dialogue with Doug Foss at the hospital, the Ivinson Memorial Hospital CEO yesterday, and he has told me that the hospital intends to hire paramedics into their patient transfer service, which of course will be taken over by them in the fall. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, did you have a question on the follow-up for that, or? Okay. I'm just going to go ahead into the supplemental then. We've talked about quite a bit of my stuff already, but on page 41, the continuation of the Fitch contract into next year to finish this transition. That was the consultant that was on the Zoom call tonight. That's that estimate, I don't believe we'll spend all that, but I'm not sure if we're going to need to bring him on site to do any kind of presentations or whatnot, so I'm trying to cover that too. And then I would like him on first couple months that we're launching to be checking everything for us too. So that's the $75,000. In the fire EMS vehicle repair, and maintenance supplies under vehicle repair, both in operations and the EMS division. I'm sorry.
Hold on. Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I'm not sure if you're going to cover this, but I know that we were told by Ivinson Hospital that approximately half of their services were uncollectible and were written off or turned over to an agency for collection. Are we going to incorporate that into our ability to collect the uncollected funds that they have when we transfer over in September or whenever we do, so that we can benefit from those individuals that may pay in the future but hadn't paid when we discontinued our agreement with the hospital?
Through you, Mayor, if I understand your question right, the billing, the accounts that are open before September 1st, it'll be before midnight on August 31st. Anything opened, they will continue and through the billing process, and then they will do a reconciliation with us later. And then we will start at 12 midnight on the 1st, and any call after that would be billed through our billing company.
Thank you, Chief. Continue, please.
Okay. On the under fire EMS, the vehicle repair services, we've been consistently being under budgeted in that, so I'm asking for an ongoing $8,000 to be added to that line. In the vehicle repair and EMS, I was asking $5,000 on the maintenance supplies, an additional $5,000 ongoing. The supplemental request in EMS is we're going to have to be doing, we'll have to stock our own supply cabinet, and then this will get us all stocked up, and then as we use materials and stuff, they'll be billed out, and then we'll be restocking through that. So, and that covers the EMS. Under fire ops, it's really, once again, vehicle repairs and vehicle repairs maintenance supplies. We're consistently overspending those lines, so I was asking for 10 in the repairs and then 15 in the supply line, thousands moving forward. Go ahead.
Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. With the increase in the maintenance and repairs, what do you attribute that to? Are they getting old, or just how much they're being used, or both?
Through you, Mayor, I would attribute it to, we've had a few accidents, and there's that, but we've had to keep some older engines running. Repairs have, the cost of repairs and the cost of supplies have both gone up quite a bit compared to what we were traditionally used to. The amount of money we're spending is gone up per repair. I think that has a big part of it. So.
Continue.
Okay. On page 45, under the personnel, the first three, city manager went over the CBA. That's to cover what the CBA negotiations covered this year. And the three line items that have our personnel in it is the fire admin line, the EMS line, and then the fire prevention line. We have employees in there. So that's 41,000, 30,000, and 6,000 ongoing for that. The civilian driver program we talked about, without doing the transfers, that would be retracted, that program. We wouldn't do that anymore since they're not driving to transfers. The next one on page 46 is the paramedic program, cancellation of that. And we've already talked about that. One thing I'll talk about when we talk about, I think it's good to put some things into context here. And I'll talk about work hours, basically. You know, we have two people that go on a transfer, and if we're running 550 transfers out of town, and, you know, the close one is Cheyenne. We go to Denver, we go to Casper, we go to Fort Collins, and average is around between 5 and 6 hours, 5.5 hours, 5 hours. A quick one's 3.5, Cheyenne and back, because by the time you get your patient loaded. So you add that up with two people, you know, that's, if you did 550 on a conservative estimate, that's 5,500 work hours. And then you look at the fixed wing transports we do, the helipad transports we do, the transports back to the nursing home. Those all take time, and you add another 1,500 hours in that. We're pushing, you know, 7,000 to 8,000 work hours that will be not existent for us anymore. So there's the reason for it. When you look at the work hours, it's a different workload we will be facing. Those programs were added because we were being faced with increasing workloads, and now we're faced with decreasing workloads, so we'll match that up. We ran 4,740 calls last year, 4,664 the year before that, 4,825 the year before that. We're going to be averaging around 4,000 calls a year with those IFTs being gone. So.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. So just kind of, thank you for that clarification, but just to reiterate and to make sure I have it clear in my head, so the level of expertise that those folks had before, we are assuming that the hospital's new services will have that same level of expertise. So hoping that then there won't be that giant, you know, gap in service. Is that correct, is my first part of my question?
Through you, Mayor, their goal is to staff the ambulances with, they'll have probably a mix, they'll probably have some paramedics hired, they'll have probably some EMTs hired. They also have access to respiratory therapists, the physicians. I mean, what they choose to send on a transfer will be an internal decision all within their organization on how they handle that moving forward. But their goal is to hire some paramedics, so.
Great, thank you. That's reassuring to hear that. And then the second part of my question is, would there be an opportunity for more advanced training for a few of our firefighters beyond the, I don't remember what they called it, like the
EMS intermediate.
Intermediate, thank you.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we've always supported any firefighter that wants to achieve the paramedic status. We've facilitated that. We have 5 right now that are working with us. We require our people to be at the EMT intermediate, ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Support. That's what we require everyone to get to. One of the changes we made through our civil service procedures is about I want to say 4 years ago, we realized the amount of investment of time trying to get people trained up and to get kick-started off onto a better path. We require people that we hire to already have their EMT basic certification. Before, we didn't require that. We had to get them through the basic, and then through when I started, there was just EMT1 and EMT2, and then it became EMT1, EMT2, and then we took ACLS and pediatric advanced life support, and then they added in BTLS, PHTLS. I mean, all these certifications we're doing, and then they changed it to from EMT2 to EMT advanced, and then EMT intermediate. I'm very confident that whatever the state does to do the transitions in the future, we will transition with them. We will adapt with them. We always have. We've done this since 1979, and that's 46 years, and we will continue to transition as required for our licensures. I don't foresee the state calling in and I pick up a phone and they say, your people aren't certified to do anything anymore because we've changed how we're doing business. It's not going to, they've never done that, so.
Great, I appreciate that, just additional detail that, like, again, it's reassuring to hear more information. Thank you.
Councilor Shumley.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, two quick questions. One is, what did the city of Laramie do prior to 1979? And the second is, are you finding that we're losing firemen as soon as they become paramedics?
Honorable Mayor, through you, we have retained paramedics and we have lost paramedics that are fire trained. We have lost some to the Front Range. About in the, I want to say 2016 to 18, we lost a few down there, and we have not recently lost any. So, and then what was your other?
Prior to 1979, how were people transported?
Prior to 1979, I believe that even predates me, and I've been here a long time. So, the hospital ran ambulances out into the county, I believe, and they also did their own transports if they had to take them. And then we had, the fire department did run an ambulance in the city taking patients, but it wasn't set up the way it's set up today. But we had some, but the modern EMS delivery system that the fire department's done is started really with a partnership with IMH in 1979. So,
thank you, Chief.
okay. Let's see. The next one is the EMS staffing model transition. Now, when we put this together, didn't quite have a name for it. It's going to be an EMS operations analyst. We've got the job description. It's here. It's posted. It's open right now, internal, and it's been that position's highly recommended by the Fitch consultants. It's highly recommended by the billing company. I talked to them about it, and also I talked to IMH compliance officer about the need for how we're going to do our business and have that central key point to have the billing company have a person and then take our runs and turn them into the revenue and how we do that. So. The fire overhires, we're running short on some long-term issues, and so that's the fire overhires is the reason for that. And that takes care of the personnel. Before I jump over into goals, I did want to mention, I know you'll probably do fleet another night, but I did want to mention that we are accepting delivery of our Engine 4. It'll probably be in 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks, and it'll probably take us close to a month, I'm guessing a month, to get our training on all our equipment operators to get it in service. So that'll be a new pumping engine that'll be arriving in town pretty quick. In fact, I had to make a trip back to Illinois for personal reasons last week. And when I was driving an engine in Nebraska driving this way, and I looked over and it said Laramie Fire Department. And I was like, my, we're going a long ways today. That was coming. It was our new one. So anyway. I'll also make basically an announcement tonight. We're getting real close to closing in and signing a contract. A year and a half ago, the legislation allocated funding to the RERT program to start replacing emergency response vehicles. Our emergency response vehicle is 2004. It's that tractor trailer out of Station 3, that big behemoth thing. The RERT met with Homeland Security. There's 8 teams. Laramie was rated as the highest priority to receive a vehicle. We've received our bids. We've been through 3 different bid processes now until we finally got down to where it's kind of working. So there's going to be 3 engines, trucks. They're heavy rescue, basically. They're going to be hazmat response units bought by the state. You won't see them in your budget, but one of them will be issued to us. They'll be probably with the contingency and the allowances for shelving and stuff, they'll be about $1.1 million units each one. We'll be receiving one. Rock Springs will be receiving one, and Sheridan will be receiving one. That will do our pre-con toward the end of this month or early next month on that, and the state will sign the contract. So that's probably about 2 years out. You'll see that tractor trailer getting replaced. So anyway, I thought I would just bring that up since we're talking, and that's news. So,
I have a question from Councilor Newman.
My question is kind of just a personal question. Can we have a touch the truck with council members when those come in? Because that sounds pretty cool that we're getting these. Yeah, so if we can schedule something like that. Right?
Yes.
Well, congratulations on getting those, and I think it'll help our community out a lot.
Oh, yeah, it's long overdue. That I've always worried the whole time in the existence of the other one is a lot of times when we're going to those hazmat calls up on the interstate, it's because it's real bad conditions, and that thing's terrible to drive in bad conditions, and so it'll be really welcome. So, okay. Before I go into the goals and stuff. Okay.
Seeing none.
Okay, accomplishments toward goals. We're working on the EMS agreement currently. That was listed. We support our community through physical safety. We still do home inspections at request of the homeowner. We don't have a right to go into someone's house like we do the businesses in town and do fire inspections, but we always do smoke detector checks. We do home safety for people. And when we're on calls, a lot of times guys will see something and they'll deal with it when they're there. So we'll continue to do that. And then our emergency medical responder classes will continue to do those. I talked about engine 4 replacement, the delivery pending. Well, I know now it's going to be in a couple weeks. We'll continue to apply for every grant that's available. The one thing that's kind of a hitch right now is there's been a delay in, typically we would have already applied for our SHSP grants, HMEP grants, those type of things, but there's been a delay. They haven't released the notice of funding opportunity yet for them. So we will be working with those when they release those. We continue to build a partnership through the State Fire Marshal and the Civil Service Departments in the state on doing academies. We do 2 a year. We have 2 people in an academy right now, and there's probably 5-6 departments participating in that. We'll continue our fire safety compliance inspections on businesses, our plan reviews, permits. We conduct training. We're very dedicated to training. We'll continue to conduct our training. Last year, we logged 12,750 hours of training for all of our personnel. We will finish the transit, I already talked about that. Fire protection agreement, we did that last year. We went from a fixed cost to a percentage base, so we don't have to keep negotiating different rates. Fixed prices, the next year goes by, you have to keep looking, so we've got it on a percentage base. We finished the dewatering out at Station 3, which is very important because we got a lot of infrastructure down there with EOC, EMA offices, and a backup dispatch center. We've done some joint training exercises, some real big ones with the Army North and the 84th Civil Service Team. Objectives for 26 is we get our specifications for the Engine 3 build out. We want to update and get into this century with our pre-plans for buildings digital. We want to digitize all of our pre-plans, and hopefully we can do that with our new software that we'll be looking at for that. We're going to be transitioning. There's a big transition nationwide from our National Fire Incident Response System to NERIS, I believe it's National Emergency Incident Response reporting platform.
Councilor Newman?
That's a quick question. What page is that?
65.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
We're getting toward the end of our SPT project. We're down to roughly $100,000 out of the $3.8 million, and we'll be finishing up with a few small projects out at the drill ground. I talked about the hazardous materials response unit already. Going to look at a program to establish a community CPR pulse point program where we can track people that by their cell phone that have CPR training, and if we're going to a call that has CPR, it would send out a notification, and if there's any trained people that are in the area, they would be able to maybe start CPR prior to our arrival, depending on, so I'm looking at that. And the Public Safety Center study for a possible SPT consideration will be conducting that. Those are the big milestones we got coming up. So I stand for any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for sharing goals also, Chief. Big question is, one of the big topics is the transition from not doing IFTs. What is the sense you get with your current fire, all the firemen out there? How do they feel about that? What's the sentiment around the stations?
It's a mismatch. It's been, I believe our goal through the negotiations is the reason I wanted to split the IFT business off is it really needed to be staffed separately and not always taking resources from the emergency response side. I believe that it will be a good thing for both the hospital and for the fire department as far as morale. They'll have more access to transfers going out when they need them to go out. We won't be dipping in and having like only 3 or 5 people left in the system due to all the transfers going on, that type of deal. So I will say this, we would not have worked a year and a half, 2 years trying to work out this deal if it was something we didn't want to do. We really tried to get this to where it worked for both the hospital and us. I believe both parties have different views, and we just couldn't work it out. And I think both parties will, in the long run, be better off. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Newman?
So I just want to make sure that I wrote my notes down right, so when we get asked. So with the transition to the hospital, we'll lose about 8 to 9,000 working hours, correct?
Yeah,
Is that about right?
I just did that in my head as I'm coming up here, because I was looking at, this topic is obviously forefront. I haven't really sat down and figured out exactly, but that's a pretty good estimation, I would say. I would say 7,500, 8,000 working hours just in because there's always two people, the one driving, one in the back, and so.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Follow up?
And then I have that with the transition of the civilian EMTs that we have now that will be leaving, we have people on staff that have those same certifications, correct? So we're not going to lose services.
Yeah, well, we have everyone, unless they're brand new, everyone's been there a while, is at advanced life support, EMT intermediate. Then we have 5 firefighters that are also paramedics. And we will accommodate anyone that, we don't require our firefighters to be paramedics. Now, we may in the future if the state transitions into different, that's what I was talking about. We will adapt as the state changes anything, any kind of regulations, we will adapt. And if we need to require that, we will. But as to this date, we've always run a ACLS, Advanced Life Support Ambulance Unit is what we run.
Councilor Schulway.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Johnson, 2 questions. One is, obviously, with reducing 8,000 hours, it's going to reduce our overtime. Just comment on that. And then the other is, with $500 million of new structures at the University of Wyoming, do we have sufficient fire equipment to fight externally fires in the dorms?
We have sufficient fire equipment for fighting fires. Our GPM, our pumps, we can put out a lot of GPM. It's whatever the system can handle, we can put out. So the aerial, obviously they got buildings. Our aerial goes up 95 feet. Well, that doesn't go to the top of 12 stories. We've never been able to get to the top with our aerial, but we have sufficient fire equipment for fire flow. So.
Thank you. Councilor
Question about overtime.
Yeah, well, we'll have probably $50,000, I believe, I figured in fuel savings that we won't be spending. The repair, hopefully I can come in and say I asked for too much money because we're not putting all the miles on our ambulances, and our repairs hopefully will go down. The replacement schedule for the ambulance should be expanding a little bit. A brand new ambulance with chassis with a new box is pushing $300,000 now. The refurbs are pushing, the last one was $190-some thousand. So hopefully I told you we expanded to 6 ambulances. We definitely won't need 6 ambulances. I'm projecting 4, but we're going to do that through basically an attrition. It's debatable whether that 5th one, but my pencil says that 4 would probably get done what we need to do. So there's cost savings other than personnel that we'll recognize by not doing the transfer. Of course, there's a revenue offset, the revenue we used to collect when we won't collect anymore for the transfers. So.
Councilor Newman.
Chief, you kind of just answered my question with what we're going to do with the extra ambulances. If we're not using them, will there be a storage cost or like a mothballing cost per se if we're not going to use them for a while?
Through you, Mayor, we'll use our ambulances. They won't just sit idle.
Okay.
I just don't want to. This transition, I don't want to. I'd like a year to evaluate. I know we won't need 6. The 5th one's the one I'm really debating. I could probably get rid of 1 right away, but we might as well. We've invested, we've used it. We might as well keep using, and then when it's due to go, then we would sell it we'd be down to the 5, and then we'd make that decision after the 5th, so.
Chief, I just want to thank you and your division and the city manager for all the work that you've done on preparing for this transition. Ever since you presented to us, I guess about 2 years ago, with the seriousness and severity of the demand and recognizing that we at times had 2 of our trucks, 4 personnel out, I began to, as a health professional, really worry about the coverage of our community and the potential, if we ever had some sort of a mass casualty event, that we would have these people out. And I just appreciate the work that went into trying to make it work, and I think this is the best possible outcome for the safety and security of the community, and thank you all for your work.
I would like to comment that I believe the civilian driver program, the civilian paramedic program, they were very valuable. They were very, they were very successful. They were highly needed. We're just going into a different system. They've done a great job. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about it.
There's no doubt the contribution that was made, and we could not have met in excess of 500 calls without that support. But it was not sustainable without changes to the system. And when the negotiations fell down, then we really had no choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few other data points is, we were running roughly 9 years ago, we were running about 3,700 calls. We were running today around 4,750 calls, 4,800. We're pushing 4,800. The IFTs, like I said, went from 300 to 550, in that same period. And those aren't short runs. Those are long. They take a lot of work hours doing those. The main thing that I targeted over the last few years is our concurrency of calls. That means when I have multiple calls running on, it keeps growing. And a lot of that's due to we're on such long transfers, so you have other calls happening. So the concurrency was really high. And then also the number of firefighters we were putting on structure fires, I've been able to increase that through the programs we've run. Our average was pretty low in 18, and we've really improved that with the programs we ran. So I appreciate all the support over these years. It was needed, and it really helped. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll just stay down here so we keep things going. Mayor, if I could, I wanted to acknowledge Mr. Troy Stentz in the back of the room. He is a member of the City Manager's Budget Advisory Committee, and he's been sitting here with us all night long, geeking out on budget. So thank you, Troy. We've appreciated having you on the committee. Well, and to that point, we are a little over schedule. I did plan to end at 8:30. I will tell council, if you want to complete the content we have on the agenda for tonight, I think it will take probably 20 to 30 minutes. If you prefer to push it off, we can push it off. So I will. Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask our IT Director, Jonathan Rhodes, to come up. I'll give you your page number references, Council. This department does have supplemental requests. It's on page 43. And then IT Division is discussed, as well as their goals and accomplishments, on page 61. 61.
The first one was 43.
Good evening, Council, Mayor.
Yeah, on page 43, we have 2 requests in the operating expenses, and they're both related to the same thing. Our current phone system, the vendor announced sometime last year that they'll no longer support the system. It's going end of life. And then subsequently, a few months ago, they declared bankruptcy. Mitel is the system we have, a system that they had purchased from another one. So the need has arisen for us to change phone vendors. Where phone systems are moving more and more is it's almost all online. It's all computers moving that way. Your traditional copper lines just aren't there anymore. And so there's a one-time cost for new physical phones. The phones we have won't work with most of the online systems. And that's a $25,000 one-time cost to purchase phones throughout buildings. And then ongoing expense of $75,000. That's just, instead of buying a phone and you get to use it and only pay for your phone line coming in, they're all subscription services now for all the, they do offer a lot more features than perhaps we had before, but that's what the ongoing costs are looking like in the phone industry. And so we're planning for that and been looking at various companies to decide what to do, but we need the funding to be able to replace that. So that's it for the operating expenses for us.
Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. $100 a piece for a headset is cheap. At the Bean, they're $850. So, yeah, way to keep that expense down.
Yeah. One of the nice things about going to a system like this, it's more expensive. Have the physical phone that can call the internet and talk is more expensive. But, if you buy whatever little headset that you can stick and plug in with USB into your computer, those work now for phones. So depending on the circumstances, that's how we're able to get a lot of savings because of the way that technology works now. Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, then we have a few adjustments, requests, and capital items, which is on page 85. They're basically, things are more expensive. Servers cost a little bit more, so we adjust up. Desktops and laptops we're seeing them cost more. And then we're also seeing some change requests from our police department. They're wanting to move to, instead of having desktops, laptops, a little bit more mobile for the officers. And so laptops cost a little bit more than desktops. So a slight increase there to help accommodate that. And then the last one is we're doing some AV equipment. You may have seen some of the Fire Station 3, Fire Station 2, some of the new equipment there in our annex conference room. The police department is next on the list, and we're seeing those costs go up slightly. So there's a few slight adjustments there, totaling around $20,000 in those capital items.
Councilor O'Doherty.
When we had our meeting at the Municipal Operations Center, I think our city clerk was carrying all of these. Is that place outfitted with?
Yeah, we have identical mics out there. So they look just like these.
Oh, okay. She was just gathering them together.
We really like the way we bought these in here is 2011. We've had these for a long time. We've really liked these microphones. And so when we were outfitting the Municipal Operations Center, we decided let's use the same ones we use in council because they seem to work well. So she didn't carry them from here. We have them at that building.
Excellent.
They work well. And then on page 61 then is some of the goals and accomplishments and objectives then for IT. We've done a lot of help with some of the projects that have going on. I had some of my staff help, especially with data conversion for EP&L, which is now live. That's our permits. There's a lot of data that had to be converted there, and I had great staff working on that. We've done a lot of the upgrades we do are in the background, and if people don't notice them, then they went well. We swapped out the Wi-Fi access points. You still got Wi-Fi good. That went well. We changed out the firewalls. People didn't notice. We're more secure, but that's good if you don't notice those things. And then we have been upgrading some of our meeting rooms around the city. I mentioned Fire Station 2 and Fire Station 3, the Municipal Operations Center. And then we have future plans at the police department again. So as the public or city staff meet in those rooms, we can do modern things like this Teams or Zoom meetings, things like that. And so the other thing we did this year is we changed our backup system to a more robust, what's called an immutable backup. It can't be deleted, so it offers much better protection, and then also keeps backups in the cloud. So should something happen here locally, our data is protected in, I think it's in Oregon right now. Amazon Web Services in Oregon is housing some of our data. And then some of our objectives going into the next year, we're continuing to assist with some of the projects that are happening, the Human Capital Management Project. IT's helping as needed there. And then our public safety system, that company is kind of pushing everyone to the cloud for theirs. So instead of running servers locally, we would be running the services there with them. And so we're helping transition that. That's, I think, in the police department requests, you'll probably see some things related to that. And then we also plan to do some internal and external penetration testing on city systems to kind of check our security, see where we can improve, and then conduct some scenarios to see, okay, if something were to happen, how well as a city can we respond to that for not only IT, but other departments as well. So those are some of the things that we have planned for fiscal year 26. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rhodes, just a quick question. How much does the city use AI?
The city uses some AI in some areas. I don't have an exact count of how many staff are using. I know in IT, we have 4 licenses that we used with ChatGPT, large language model. Our use case there is help. Hey, I know this thing exists. Where is it at? Today I asked it, okay, when you try to make a backup of a CD, burn to a CD, it makes a cached copy. Where is that located? And it told me, and I was able to recover a file because of that. And so we have some uses. We have a policy on AI as a city that be careful with how you use it. Be aware that don't put any PII out there because that would be, breaking trust. If you use it to make a decision, disclose that to the public. Things like that. So it is being used a lot of times in helping. I look at the IT side coming up with, hey, how would I write that program? It can help me with some of the syntax of, oh, that's how that's done, or this is where that's located, of where I go and click this box to make something happen. And we have some interest in use in the other departments as well. I know it can help do presentations and things like that. And so we're starting to see a little bit more and more of it, which is why we've had a policy now for a couple of years. And other departments might speak to their usage of it, but it is being used.
Other questions or comments? Oh, sorry. Councilor O'Doherty.
Acrobat kept offering me the AI prompt. It kept making me mad. So I found out you can get into preferences and turn it off so it doesn't keep popping up like, do you want to make this whole novel into, Cliff Notes version? So anyway, everybody, if you want to turn it off, it's the option under preferences.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilor Shumway's AI question, I would just supplement that by saying I was planning a training for our staff in August. And unfortunately, have had to cancel that because we have seen some revenue declines, like $1.5 million less in direct distribution. So I felt like it wasn't timely for this year. But I will say I have, through that research just recently, yesterday, unearthed a free source of some AI training through the National Governors Association. So we're trying to embrace it. And as Jonathan said, many of the departments are using it, particularly to save time in terms of helping write documents and such. And so I think it really has potential to be an efficiency game changer for the city. And if we can find some good training, we'll bring it in. So with that, Council, I am moving to page 82 of your booklet. And I don't look like Patty, but I'm acting on behalf of Patty Russell, our HR director. She had a family issue arise and was unable to present her budget to you tonight. The good news is it's very simple. There are no supplemental requests in the Human Resource Department. When I look at accomplishments that have occurred in this department in the past year, the city HR department has revamped our city wellness program. Staff in the HR department have also received a SHRM certification. That's the Notable Professional Association for Human Resource Professionals. So that's a big milestone. They have also started and are actively engaged in what Jonathan just mentioned, which is the human capital management piece of our ERP software being implemented. As they look to 2026, they'll continue implementing the HCM module with the intention for it to go live in the fall. And also this summer, the employee handbook is being updated, and that will go live hopefully in July and be sent out to our staff. It will be updated to reflect any changes in federal, local, or state law, and to have a companion document for policies and procedures. That's a really important piece of running a big organization like this. Also in 26, HR will be developing some more training initiatives and revamping the city's safety program. So that is what they'll be working on next year. Any questions that are HR related?
I see none.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to switch to city administration, city clerk, city council, and general government budget. So we're going to go to page 48 of your document. And I will start off with city administration. Like HR, there are no supplemental requests in my office, in the city manager's office or city administrator's office. I'll mention some of the work that has occurred in 2025. Council will recall we did submit the Swiffer grant that would create a recycling program for multifamily housing and commercial properties in Laramie. This is a program that the public have been clamoring to have introduced in Laramie, and we're very hopeful that that grant will be awarded. It would essentially fund startup costs for the program. That grant application is in front of the EPA. We also have secured block grant funding for the solar array at the Laramie Fire Department, secured design services for First Street Depot Park parking lot, and also grants from WORG for replacing non-compliant sidewalks at Labonte and implementing Spring Creek Phase 2 trail extension. We have established project plans in conjunction with the Laramie Urban Renewal Agency for those two projects that you're well aware of at North 4th Street for housing redevelopment, and also the same at Old Slade School. As we look at other management goals that we made accomplishments toward in 2025, the Dallin Diversion Rehabilitation Project is 90% grant funded. The Historic Preservation Plan and Historic Registry for the Hart Ranch is 100% grant funded. We initiated design for the groundwater monitoring well network in the aquifer to be expanded as per the Aquifer Protection Plan you've adopted. The Human Rights and Relations Commission and City Manager's Budget Advisory Commission were established and are active. And we also implemented market-based compensation adjustments for all city positions and secured $10 million in a grant and loan for business development and expansion at Wyotech. As we look to 2026, we will be updating the municipal emissions inventory as part of our sustainability program, environmental sustainability. HRM software has already been mentioned. That's a big push across the organization. We have secured 100% grant funding for the Resident Economic Mobility Workforce Housing Project, which I mentioned to you all some time ago. That is through ICMA, my professional association, and I will be involving Community and Economic Development Director Teeny and the Assistant City Manager with me in that cohort learning professional development. Then we have hope in 2026 to complete that Dallin Diversion Dam Rehabilitation Project and the main campus renovation here at City Hall and the annex. And then lastly, now that we do have the Monolith Ranch in our direct management along with the Hart Ranch, our intention this summer is we will maximize hay crop revenue from those properties for a positive P&L. With that, that is the conclusion of city administration. And if you have questions, happy to take those.
Questions or comments? I see none.
Okay. So I will move to page 39. We're going to move into general government. And there are some supplemental requests here. General government is a cost center where where budget is made for activities, services, programs, fees that are affecting the whole of the organization, I guess is the way I would characterize it. So starting at the bottom of page 39, there is a supplemental request for community partner funding. That's the 2% inflationary adjustment that I recommended was sustainable, and the council have made those awards last night. Then moving to page 43. Also in general government. My eyes are getting tired. I have to make the page bigger. There is a recommended decrease in appropriations. This is a support transfer to the Recreation Center, for Recreation Fund capital. I should mention something to you. Our Facilities Maintenance Division has been organized under the Recreation and Parks Department for years. We've made a change this year in how really we account for those expenses. It's maybe not fair if you're the Parks and Recreation Director to have to bear the expense for keeping upkeep and cleaning of all city facilities. So we're apportioning those costs out appropriately as an internal service. And if Jen wants to add anything, she's welcome to. So you'll see some entries in your budget document that are reflecting those changes and the expensing of those things appropriately. Also in general accounts, there's a one-time increase support for capital investments over at the Rec Center for maintenance. And then the third item there, oh, never mind, that's an account entry. Okay, and then let's go to page 44. At the top of that page in general accounts. So you'll recall a few years ago, the city converted from being self-insured to the state health insurance program. That was in August of 2023. Employers must contribute 0.6% of active employee wages. And so this $22,000 is reflecting the change in health insurance rates there. This overall has been a really, really positive choice for the city. It's really helped us to stabilize our health insurance costs and our personal expenses largely. And then also in general accounts, this is where we pay premiums for liability and property insurance through WARM, so there's a recommended adjustment there. WARM did receive a higher bid for the pooled liability and property coverage that we share with the other cities in the pool, but they were successful in negotiating that down to a 15% increase. And I'm sure many of you are aware that liability and property insurance rates are going up pretty much nationwide based on, yeah, I see you nodding, I will say no more. Lastly, in general accounts, you'll see we have been budgeting $130,000 for inmate housing at the Albany County Detention Center. We have not realized that amount, so we're adjusting the budget downward to what have been our actual experiences over the last few years. And then you recently approved the Crime Victim Witness Program to receive some additional funding through our MOU with Albany County, so a 25% increase there. And then lastly, $120,000. I discussed this earlier. This is the economic development incentive where we pay 0.006 cents per dollar or refund that taxable, refund the sales tax back to the retailers over where Home Base and Ross and Ulta are. And this is the incentive that we're paying that is returning a 150% return on investment based on the first 6 months or half a year of experience there. Any questions? Okay, I think we're ready to go to clerk and council then. Page 39. Did I miss something? I don't think so.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Part of our the mental health initiative regarding the police department, a lot of that was because we didn't want to be throwing people in jail that had a mental health crisis. I'm hoping that's what brought our inmate fees down.
Through you, Mayor, Councilor Doherty, that's a great comment and question, but I have no data to share with you or even, anecdotal. So let me go back and talk to the chief and the sheriff. Maybe there's a way we would know that or not, but I certainly don't know that right now, so. Yeah. Yeah. In the city clerk's office, and again, I am covering for Nancy tonight because she's always here, except this night. And we had Ryan, and I forgot that she was taking this night off, so I'm going to pinch it for her also, and Ryan's going to help me if I misstate anything. There are a few very minor supplemental requests in the city clerk's office. iPad data service, this will help the office to be a little more, I'm sorry, yes, 39. To be more effective in supporting the new EnerGov module of our ERP software. Also a credit card device. They are receiving monies for the rental program, receiving monies for various licenses and applications, and also payment and processing fees at $1,000, needing to cover those. Would you like to add anything, Ryan? Okay, very good. And then at the top of that same page, Council, you'll see one supplemental request for the City Council budget, which is administered by the City Clerk. Actually, two. One is for $625, and that is just a very small increase in the dues to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. And then also phone service for city councilors for your cell phone stipends or cell phone provision at $4,320. And then if you would like to move to page 49. I'll just share a few things from the city clerk's office that have been accomplishments last year and things that they'll be working on this upcoming year. We've mentioned the enterprise resource planning software project, but of course the licensing piece went live in this past year, and Nancy and Ryan were very integral to that process along with many other members of staff, so that was an enormous accomplishment. With respect to management goals, they also have continued to work on obtaining their Masters of Municipal Clerk or MMC designation. That's important professional development from the primary professional association that supports clerks nationally. 2024, as you recall, was an election year that usually brings a lot of additional work in the clerk's office, and they were successful in supporting candidates and also the county clerk's office in affecting the election. They also held stakeholder meetings in 2024 to help educate those outside users who are having to use the new liquor license permitting software and whatnot. And I'll tell you, for my own part, I was really proud to see them taking the time to help those license holders learn how to use that new software. They've also been working extensively with the Wyoming State Archives to archive city records. And I don't know if Nancy mentioned this to you guys or not, but we got a bill for the archiving fee from the state, and I think it was 93 cents, Ryan, is that right? I'm serious, it was like cents on the dollar. So that was pretty amazing, and if Jonathan was here, he could talk about the expense of hosting servers or paying the archives, and I think there's a clear net gain there for the city. Looking to...
I have a question from Vice Mayor Richards.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious about that. We've been working on the archiving for a while now because I'm sure there are a lot of records. Is there an anticipated end date to that?
I don't know. Do you know how many months of work? I'm putting Ryan completely on the spot.
So far, we're working on the city clerk's department stuff. So that's more of, the council items that we do, resolutions, ordinances, agenda packets, minutes. A lot of our documents have been kind of scattered over the past few years. So we're going to do some work with the other departments like planning, Parks and Rec, all of those to kind of get those into this system. So we're trying to get what we can do now before like the remodel, and we're losing storage space, and then we'll just keep reaching out as we go. So it's hard to say. Yep. I've been working on records for almost 7 years myself. So, yeah.
There was an enormous backlog. And then, of course, as a city municipal government, we're generating new records every single day all across the organization. It's a big task. Looking to 2026, they are hoping to continue their efforts to transfer permanent city records to those digital archives. They're also working on the division dashboard that is part of council goals and that I'm working with department heads to get in place this year. They'll also plan to be working with you all to devise new ways to circulate information about city council meetings and activities. And of course, this year they've already created the video recaps and some other things, so that will continue to be an effort for the second half of this calendar year. And lastly, they are working with the assistant city manager to develop methods for enforcement of unregistered rental housing units and non-compliant units, which is a big task. So wrapping their head around the easiest and fastest and leanest way to do that. And then they're still working on those MMC designations. That's a multi-year process. Okay, I think I hit the clerk's office, and if there are any questions, great.
Questions or comments? I see none.
Thank you. So we have 2 minutes, and I think Director Wade was going to come up and kind of send us home tonight.
Are we going to finish by 9, or do we need to?
No, we're going to finish.
Okay.
We're going to call this helpful tips from. Yeah. Do you need to do anything before I start giving that? Okay.
Go ahead, proceed.
I just want to offer some helpful tips. And so remember, you're being asked to, what's gone over with you tonight are supplementals to the adopted budget. So there is a section in a bookmark called supplementals. Those are the actual increases to the budget that are being recommended. Remember that there are parts of the budget, like personnel, that are centrally budgeted. There are all kinds of changes in the cost of personnel from year to year because we do a zero-based budget for those costs every year, and there's benefit changes, and those costs can go up or down. Those are not controlled at the department level. That is not a supplemental. And so when you look at those department expense tables, I just want you to keep that in mind because sometimes those numbers can look a little weird. But if you see it on the personnel request supplemental, you'll know it's new. If you see it in the table, you'll know it was something like insurance changes or people changing distributions or whatever else, but there has not been a change in the underlying position if you're seeing it just on the table and not in the supplemental. The second thing I wanted to say is you have a special meeting upcoming on May the 19th. At the next meeting, you will get forms to complete. If you wish to propose changes to the budget recommendation, you can propose those changes to your fellow council members at that special meeting, and you will all vote on those items. That is all from me. I hope that was helpful. Happy to take any, yeah. I'm not going to take any questions.
So it's 9 o'clock now. Do we need, we still need public comment? Do we need to suspend? Okay.
No, not for a work session.
Okay. Are there any public comments, yes, on this agenda item? Please come up and state your name.
Hi again. I am really sorry to keep us. I'll try to be quick. I'm actually horrified that I'm up here talking right now because I don't do public speaking, but I feel like this is really important. I feel like a lot of things were glazed over, and I don't have a real horse in the game, or at least I hope I don't, someday, but do you all know the difference between an EMT and a paramedic? Yes. I mean, it's a tenfold.
Continue, but you.
Sorry.
So I ask you to make comments and not to question the council.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I'll just make the comment.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a tenfold amount of training. I mean, it's the quote difference between 150 hours of training and 1,500 hours. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Realistically, we talked about their budget, so.
Oh,
okay.
I didn't know I was supposed to speak earlier.
If you're comments can be germane to the budget, which is the work session.
Okay. I guess I would say then the value that you're getting out of this gap in service, I think that the value will plummet, because out of all of the paramedics that are on the fire staff, as I know, this might be incorrect, and I can't ask anybody, but as far as I know, most of them are admin, which means how often are they actually going out on calls? And so I would say that the amount of money that you're paying in order to have EMS services in town going forward, for the quality that they're able to provide, again, will just goes down. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further public comments?
We have one online.
Okay.
Jordan Hayes.
Hello. Do I share my screen?
Mr. Hayes, can you turn your camera on, please?
Let me see. Oh, yep, I got it there. Okay, should be good.
You have comments related to
regarding the budget, the cancellation of the paramedic program, I just want to make clear that we have 4 currently active paramedics at LFD that are fire paramedics, sorry. One of whom is on indeterminate injury leave. 3 others are all senior personnel. And in fact, all 4 fire paramedics are senior personnel, which means they're almost never on the ambulance. Unless you happen to be hurt on an A shift day and you're at an outlying station, you are unlikely to get paramedic care if only the fire paramedics are there. So there's 4 active. I think the 5th one Chief was referring to is currently a paramedic student, but he is not yet a paramedic. So come September, the only paramedic you are likely to see giving care is the one who will at that point possibly be no longer a student. In fact, I was joking with one of the other paramedics the other day that he hasn't seen the back of the ambulance in months because he's a CO. And one is anyway, so you have to understand that yes, there's a bunch of hand-waving and spinning of the fact that LFD still has paramedics, but fact of the matter is come September 1st, or as we all continue on and leave early, likely, probably sometime midsummer, you're not going to have the 5 of us anymore, and that will effectively end paramedic care in LFD, which you have to understand that I was trained by excellent LFD paramedics. I mean, I would say possibly even better than the 5 of us. I mean, we had 3 flight paramedics, 4, something like that, but they've all since left. And so also I just want to say, this is significant, and you talk about psychological care for people. One of the medications that we give to those people is only a paramedic, and in fact, actually both are only paramedic drugs. So expect more of those people to just be held down on the cot, because that's really going to be their only option. Of the 24 medications that we carry on the ambulances, 10 are paramedic only. And then there are a multitude of interventions that are paramedic only. There was, I think, some confusion maybe on my part that I shared a story about a transfer where a critical care paramedic was useful. But even though LFD is getting rid of transfers, most of my job is running EMS, running 911. And that's where you also really need paramedic care. We have a giant county. LFD is the only provider of EMS in the county. So if you have an hour-and-a-half long transport with somebody who's bleeding out, they need a paramedic to give TXA and calcium. And they're no longer going to get that service. So basically, regardless of how it's spun or the hand waving, you have to understand that you are presiding over the demolition of high-level care, high-level EMS care in Laramie. It's we're going from basically 120% relative to our peers to bare minimum for Wyoming. There's no way to spin it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Then I think this concludes our meeting, and the meeting is adjourned.